Hello and welcome. This is a special Mappers Delight program that we have created here at Fantasy Grounds College. So it's kind of a special thing that I wanted to do for a long time to get all the mappers together. And what I was hoping is to bring everyone together so that they can meet each other and talk and show their work and talk about what they do and what they love. So without further ado, I'm going to get this thing started. And I want to introduce our first guest. And our first guest is Mike, also known as Maphammer.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Mike. I'm glad you made it.
Me too.
Yep.
It's an honor to be here.
Oh, great. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing as far as, outside of the hobby? You don't have to tell us too many personal things. Just give us a general idea of how it's related to the role playing and, things like that.
So basically, how I started role playing, or
Yeah. Or you can even just talk about like what region you live in, that
oh,
sort of
okay,
stuff.
okay. So I live in Middle Europe,
Hmm.
in Hungary, and I started role playing like around 15 years ago. I was playing Magic the Gathering in a club here in the city I live,
Okay.
and there was a group that introduced me to D&D, and I really liked it. Unfortunately, I didn't have uh, many opportunity to play it back then, but now I'm organizing a team to play it. I'm gonna be the DM with my maps with it. I'm really excited about it.
Hmm. So you get to see your players actually play through the work that you've done.
Yeah. It will be really interesting.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'm really glad you joined us. I've been following your maps for a long time, and I think that you've got a good thing going, and I've seen a lot of improvements over the months. And
Thank you.
I also see your partnerships out there, and I see your Patreon, things like that. So I'm really proud of what you've done for yourself and the community, and also for your friends and family. So that's a good thing.
Thank you.
Um, One of the things we do here at Fantasy Grounds College is we encourage people to do other things other than just role playing stuff, which is artwork and arts and crafts and writing and all kinds of things. So not only are we just doing fantasy grounds, but we're also encouraging artists and people that love to draw and those sort of things. So I'm really glad to have all you guys here. This is great. So in your role playing experience, what was that like? Like, are you playing D&D? You're playing Pathfinder, or what's that like?
When I was playing, I played D&D,
Hmm.
but yeah, I didn't have many opportunities to play it. What got me back into D&D was I started watching Critical Role.
Uh-huh.
I guess a lot of the people know what's that, and I fell in love with it. Like it's super awesome, and actually that's what started me to draw maps. I was a freelancer artist before that, but I don't really like that,
Okay.
and I wanted something to change, and I was watching Critical Role, and I was thinking like, well, I should make maps. That would be interesting, and I browsed the net for maps and checked what's out there, and I felt like there is a room for more highly detailed maps, like the style I'm doing it.
Okay. Well, that's
Yeah,
great.
that's a little bit different than others because my maps are a little smaller because I make them in tabloid and A3 sizes, but they are easy to print because of that. So yeah,
Correct.
I thought it would be a good thing.
Yeah, it's very good. I really like your maps. I like the variations and the coloring and things like that you've done. You pay a lot of attention to detail, and as a dungeon master myself, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
have you tried any of the other role-playing systems like Sci-Fi or Pathfinder or any of the others?
I first tried the D&D 3,
Uh-huh.
system. No, I'm gonna play in the five. But other than that, there was almost like a copy to D&D. I tried Hungarian stuff, but that wasn't that good.
Oh, okay. So do you
I actually I don't remember what was the name of it, but mostly I know D&D. Yeah.
okay. So in the region you live in, do they have any role-playing games that are kind of for the region, like Eastern European type role-playing game, or anything different than you've seen in the U.S. or in the Western?
Actually, yes, there is a game that many Hungarians played. I think that's an only Hungarian game called Magus,
Uh-huh.
like mage or something translated.
Uh-huh.
And actually, a lot of people played it. It's really complicated. The rules are really complicated,
I,
but there is nice artwork behind it, and actually the gameplay is quite fun. I heard. So yeah,
I would like to see that. I'm very interested in other role-playing systems, especially when they are not mainstream for like the Western countries. So that is really
gonna
cool.
search some pictures for you after the stream.
Perfect. So other than Roll20, what was your main inspiration, or do you have a mentor or anything like that? So do you have like any sort of memory or artistic background or anything? Maybe your father or your mother was an artist, or maybe your wife and or your friends, something.
Actually, I started drawing when I was 18 years old,
Uh-huh.
and I started it because of my one of my friends. He was a 3D artist. He was learning to be a 3D artist, and I back then I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I said, yeah, let's start drawing, and I focused all my attention to drawing, and I could learn it. I self-taught it. I learned it from YouTube videos and tutorials, and after 2 years, I could manage to go to a level where I could find some freelance works,
Okay. So,
and I was working on. I started working at 20 years when I was
uh-huh.
20 years old, and I was a freelancer until I started MapHammer 4 months ago or five now.
Okay. So that's a cool thing. So have you been able to break away from freelancing, or are you just doing this, or are you doing both still?
I'm only doing MapHammer now.
That's great. So you're able to do this full time just about?
Yes, yes, I'm doing it full time now.
That is awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. Do you have family to basically attend to or to put aside for the moments that you're working on your maps?
I have a girlfriend I live with,
Mm-hmm.
but she's an artist too, and
Oh,
she's learning to be. Uh, she wants something to do with D&D, but she doesn't know actually what will be it yet. But I think she will make NPC cards and pyramid NPCs on Patreon.
that's
That
awesome.
that's his goal,
Yeah,
and I'm helping her to achieve this goal. And she's learning from tutorials too, so I can help her with it. Other than that, my family is living in the city and not very far, so I can so I'm in contact with them weekly.
great. That's a really cool thing that you got your friends involved and that you guys have a similar interest. And it's really cool that she's going to pick something a little different because I noticed that there's really difficult problems on getting character art. So if she's any good at doing character art, I think she'll have a good chance at getting into the market.
Yeah, she's into character arts. She's making she's drawing people's characters as as a freelancer now, uh, until she can start a Patreon because
Nice,
she's still in college. So
nice. All right, so some of the maps that I have up here are the fort. So you have a day and night fort. I
Yeah.
realize you can't see them, but I think that I'd like to know just a tiny bit of the story behind the fort.
Actually, I was thinking to make a city map or a
Uh
town
huh.
map, but I wanted to show the walls too. So I ended up in a corner of the city,
Right.
and I wanted to add some story hooks to it, like there is a cart under the tree and some barrels near the house. So maybe that's important for somebody. I don't know. And I wanted to have some space for fight, and so I added that little outside area
Uh huh. Cool.
plus the walls. Yeah,
Yeah, I can see the water barrels there. They probably collecting water or maybe waste or something like that.
yeah.
So I want to ask you, what was your proudest moment or artistic moment with your map making? When was it that you actually, can you describe that? I know that most artists know this, is that there is a time where you go, you know what, this is right. This is what life is supposed to be like. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, Actually, let's see. I think the proudest moment was when I started Patreon
Uh-huh.
and I uploaded my first map and I made some posts of it on Facebook,
Uh-huh.
and I received a huge amount of positive feedback. Like hundreds of people liked my post and talked about it, and they were they were very supportive. Like actually on the in the first 3 days, around 20 or 30 people joined to my Patreon, and I was really proud that I could make a map and start something that people really like. So I was really happy.
So did you get that rush or that feeling? You know what I'm talking about when it feels good, like you get that rush that goes through your body? I don't know if you experience that, but I do when I make something beautiful.
I think um, I think my latest, no, not the latest map, but the map that is in the presentation, the Duergar Outpost. When I finished that map, I was like, yeah, I really like that. There is rarely the feeling for the artists when they are really satisfied what they've done after they done it. But that map, I really felt, I really was proud to that map, and I felt really good. Most of the time after I finish a map and I'm like, I should make some more changes, maybe add some details. I don't know, but I should post it. Okay, let's post it. It's finished. I call it finished. But after that map, I felt it's done and it's complete, and it was a really good feeling that I'm satisfied with it.
Yeah, I noticed that most map makers and artists are very critical of their own work.
Yes, I'm that type too.
And to have that moment where you're proud of your own work is very, very hard to come by. So
Yes,
I
yes,
understand that.
exactly.
Totally understand that. So in this slide, we have a couple questions, and we have the map of the bridge. And I also have a video sample that I'm going to play.
Okay.
Before I play the video, though, I want to know what your approach was on making this map. Like exactly how, in so many words, like how did you think of it, and what was your process like, and maybe how long did it take?
First of all, I'm planning my own campaign as a DM, and I was into fire giants and dwargars when
Uh
I
huh.
was when I was started that map, and I was like, yeah, when the players go to that mountain, they will first encounter some dwargars, and there should be a cool place to do it. And yeah, that's what came into my mind. Some outpost of the dwargars with the bridge.
That's awesome.
That's how I started it. It took about this one took about a week, I think, a week of work.
About a week.
Yeah, about a week.
Okay. So I'm going to play a little sample video, and this is going to be a video promotional thing to kind of show how to use the map, I guess, in a scenario. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to play it now. That was really cool. How was that done?
My friend, Printable Heroes, I was cooperating with him. He just released his dual guards before I made the map, and I was like, dude, why not make a video with them? And he found it. And after that, there is a guy that I worked with like a few moments ago on a video, and he helped me with the cutting and stuff.
That's
It's a
great.
really simple video, like with camera, with a phone, recorded with a phone, but we added some music and some basic effect to clear the. It was a really bad quality because of the phone button effect could have with it.
Right. I think that was cool. That's a really cool promo video for just you guys throwing that together. That's awesome. So, what's your
Yeah.
relationship with the other author, the other artist?
Uh, I searched him
Uh huh.
like after I started on Patreon, I think 2 months later,
Mhm.
because I really liked his figures, his miniatures,
Mhm.
and I was like, why not work together? I can provide you maps, then you can take photos of your miniatures on my maps, and we can cross promo each other, and it can be a good thing to work with somebody. And he was really into it, and we are working together since then. Occasionally, like one or two releases per month.
That's great. I was actually introduced to that printable heroes type thing before I met you, or before I had spoken to you, and I thought that was a really cool project. And maybe someday I'd like to bring him on. But he's donated a lot of those to our college as well, and to
Oh,
some.
that's awesome! I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it was interesting that you had partnered with him. I was like, wow, some of my favorite artists are working together. I think that's awesome. And that's kind of what this thing was for, is so that you guys can get together and maybe you'll work on a big project together. I don't know. But at least you'll have had the opportunity to talk to each other a little bit. Okay,
Yeah,
so what type of software or tools do you use to do your artwork?
I'm using only Photoshop,
Okay,
and I have my own assets I made.
okay,
That I have the core assets I need. Then I bought some textures to make them more realistic, and yeah, I think that's all I use. Some both textures with my core assets.
do you use any other software tools to help you finish your product?
No, only Photoshop.
Okay. So what do you kind of already have in work? Like what kind of projects you got going now? You don't have to say them if they're, non-disclosure thing,
No,
but
it's fine. I'm currently working on an Underdark cave map
oh,
with glowing mushrooms and stuff. I think it will be really cool. And what I was waiting for a long time, I finally can start the Galon battleship next month with the water map. And that's a cooperation with Printable Heroes 2. He will bring a dragon turtle with it, and this will be a really fun release.
that's really cool. So if no one has heard of you before, or if you're new to the stream or to the audience, how could we find your work?
I'm on Patreon. All my works are on Patreon
Uh-huh.
slash Maphammer.
Hmm.
And I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook with the name Maphammer, so I can be found there.
Okay, great. And we'll provide those links after the seminar as well. So if anyone out there in the stream wants to get a hold of these people for either projects or for their own personal games, or just to collect maps, that's what I like to do. And we'll make that available to you. Now, one last question I'm going to ask each one of the artists here, and you're the first one, is do you think there would be any time for you to donate to Fantasy Grounds College? Now, you've already donated maps, but I'm
Yeah,
talking about like an hour maybe where you just either film a video or come in and show some students a step-by-step type thing with your with a screen share with a smaller group.
I would say it's possible. I don't know when yet because I'm working
Right.
a lot on mind maps. But I'm not saying no. I say it's possible that I can attend to an hour of
Okay.
teaching or something.
No problem. I mean, it's not mandatory. I was just curious because I'm going to ask each artist the same question, and I guess I'm putting you all on the spot. I guess. So,
Fine.
anyways, thanks for coming, Mike. If you want to hang out, you're welcome to. You can watch the stream at this point, so you don't get confused. But don't go anywhere because at the end of everyone speaking, we're going to have a live Q&A. So if you need to go get some water and take a break, I'd like you to come back and answer some questions.
All right, I'll be here.
All right. So who do we got next? Game Tile Warehouse. Welcome.
G'day, Leiron. How you doing?
Pretty good. So this is Chris. He is representing Game Tile Warehouse. He is the CEO, owner, and operator. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. Good to be here. About 2 years ago, I was driving a ute and working long hours, and it wasn't really working for me. I've always been kind of creative, and it's something I wanted to do more. So I sat down and I had a look at what was around in terms of RPG, trying to get a lay of the land and find a niche, I guess, somewhere to come in, because the first thing I realized is there's so much out there, and to compete or contribute, you know, had to have something different. And so after my Photoshop crashed, I found GIMP, and it took me a long time to learn how to use it, but I use it for everything now, and uh, I wouldn't be anywhere without it. And I think the first project I did was some modern day rooftop mats, like skyscrapers, with the city below, for like Ninja Turtles and Aliens and Super Spies. And when I started, I wasn't really sure what I was doing, in terms of technical delivery, shading, layers, gridding, sizing. Basically, all the basic skills that you need to put a map together and make it coherent, make it usable, make it pretty. And I decided to put them on Kickstarter, and I actually got a really good response. And the pattern has been to keep doing that and listening to what people wanted and trying to meet that need. I was really surprised when it did as well as it did, and it's enabled me, through continuing to do them, to keep doing what I do and not have to get back in the truck or on the forklift. And it's been a pretty wild ride so far. I've been involved in a lot of cool things, worked with quite a few people on all sorts of different projects, and managed to build myself quite a large range of different tiles. I'm still not really sure where I'm going with it. I think I'm just trying to do a little bit of everything and work out what I can do well and look at what I would like to do next.
Awesome. So what region are you from, Chris?
I'm from Australia,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty hot here tonight.
I imagine. Uh, so anything you could tell us a little bit about your role-playing experience, like what that's like, your history with it, what games you like to play, that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure, man. It's pretty slim in terms of the tabletop. Uh, been working most of my life. When I was a kid, I discovered the Ian Livingstone, Steve Jackson fighting fantasy books, and that was, for me, that opened up a whole new world. I was completely enamored with that. Um, I owned all of them. I got them all at garage sales. Hunted them out until I had the whole collection, I tried to draw the maps. There was little maps in front of like Port Blacksand and stuff, and that were probably my first maps. I still got them in the wall in my bedroom. My wife framed them recently, which was nice, very nice touch. Um, and HeroQuest, when HeroQuest came out, my mum bought that for me. I would have been about 12, I think. I'm 39 now. And that set in stone my love for those kind of games. But in the main, I tend to gravitate toward computer games. I've played thousands, like most people. I love RPG. It's probably my favorite fantasy RPG. Big fan of the Xbox One and Elder Scrolls. I
Right.
love that. Yeah,
That's
um,
awesome.
yeah, and it's been pretty mad going from what I was doing to what I do now, and I'm managing to make a living off it, which is even more amazing. Um, and yeah,
That's awesome. So do you have any genres of choice or anything that you're specific to for your gaming?
I would have to say Old Hammer. It's
Okay.
probably it's probably the most enduring theme that I've come across. I really like the high fantasy theme. It's probably my favorite. So I've tried to branch out into sci-fi to to meet people's requests. It's a lot harder to do sci-fi. I have to say, it's a completely different mindset, and I'm not too keen to go back to it if I have to. I prefer fantasy.
I
And fantasy,
understand.
yeah, fantasy is like, uh, how do you put it? It's like fantasy is more cubic and it's more static, and you've got magic. So instead of having to come up with a plausible technology and machines that look like they perform a specific function, and when you're inventing an entire sci-fi world, you gotta make hundreds of them. You just put an explosion with magic sparkles, and it does the job. And I like that. I like the simplicity of fantasy. And even though there's so many thousands of maps out there, it's still got depths. Like there are still uh, people crying out for more maps and more maps and more maps, and I find that quite incredible. I mean, D&D is like 50 years old, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong there. And just the sheer amount of material that's been produced by so many talented people, and just everybody that wants to get in on it is just jaw dropping. And yet there's still a need for more maps, and I guess that's where my livelihood comes from. I just find that amazing.
Yeah, I do too. It's incredible. I'm really enamored by the artwork and maps and character art and things like that. And that's one reason I love to collect maps. Even if I never use them, I still like having them.
That
So what is your main inspiration, or do you have a mentor or anything, or
I'm not really sure I have a mentor. Kind of just fell in love with the whole idea of being able to represent these make believe worlds. Um, I've always just gravitated toward them. I loved Lego. I once built an entire Jurassic Park in my room out of like blocks. I used towels for water. I lived out in the country. We didn't have access to game shops or money for that. We had to improvise, and I think that reliance on my imagination is and a lot of reading is probably what drives me. Is just like all these stories that others have written, all this history and lore, like Alice in Wonderland and all those cool books that are enduring and most people know of. Like they're self-enclosed worlds, and I just find that incredible. And to be able to build one, um, it's a really fun process. I mean, if you know what you're doing, and once you know what you're doing to some extent, so you're not struggling with the tools and trying to put down on the screen or on paper what you're trying to put there, and you can't because you don't have the skills for it. I still find that I have these ideas and I want to do them, and I try and sketch them, or I try and do them on design, and it just doesn't work. So I'm always trying to train my skills, and the one way I do that is I look at other mappers and I look at other RPG art, and I tend to grab a picture that I'm impressed by, and I'll zoom right in, and I'll examine how they did how they put things together. When I used to play Xbox, it used to just be distraction and a game, and now I find like when I'm playing Assassin's Creed or Elder Scrolls, I'm working all the time. I'm looking at the floor, or I'm looking at the texture and the perspective from the rooftop, so that I can replicate that. And so there's just so much material around. It comes from within, but a lot of it comes from without. It's a really it's amazing to see what people can do, and it's really inspiring. And you know, just to be able to be a part of that and contribute to putting things on people's tables is just an awesome feeling.
That is really cool. I like that story. I too am a reader, and I like the very same things that you're talking about, is being inspired by things around and also from within. That's really great. So what was your proudest moment, or your when you knew that this was right for you, other than monetary, you know?
Right. Yeah. Proudest moment would probably be, even though it was monetary, but it turned out that Kickstarter is a lot more complicated than I thought. I made 5 grand, but I paid out 5.5 to deliver. But the proudest moment was seeing that I was able to um, present something that I'd made to a community that had hardcore saturation of maps, terrain, tiles, tokens, character sheets, you name it, and it still get uh, appreciated, and um, you know people liked it, and that was a good feeling, because I wasn't sure how I was doing. I had no stick to gauge it by. It's not something I'd done before, and for me that was the turning point. That was like, okay, that worked. I can do this. I just need to uh, do another one so that I can buy some time to work on it, rather than having to look around for another job. And luckily, I managed to put something else together, uh, kickstart that, and it just went from there. I slowly built a small following from nothing. Like, I don't use social media a lot. I haven't had time, so I don't have an audience or anything like that. But I had a lot of repeat backers. I actually had a lot of support from Fantasy Grounds users who actually helped me change and implement new design concepts over what I was working with, so that it was better. And that was really cool, you know. And rather than just sort of um, present something and go, here you go, that's it, that's what I've done. It became like a collaboration, and I've made a lot of good friends and a lot of good associates, and it's just been a blast, man. I've been able to contribute tiles and tokens and maps and drawings and things to different people's projects, work on my own, and I'm living the dream as far as I'm concerned, and it's amazing. I feel very lucky.
Yeah, I noticed you have a wide variety of artwork, so it's not just maps. You're doing tiles and cards and tokens and all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's right. I guess I'm trying to find out my weaknesses and my strengths in terms of design, and I was trying to work with each component for a tabletop board game that I would need to master. So cards, tiles, maps, tokens, one after the other. I spent 4 months concentrating on working on a different component. And so now 2 years later, I've got all that experience with each component. I'm starting to put my own game together.
That's great. I'm looking at the photo of your dragon thrones. It's laid out on a table. So is that one of your projects that you liked, or how long did this take? Like, what was this process like?
That was a commission. I got approached by a group that were doing a LARP in Pennsylvania, and they wanted a specific concept. They sent me a picture of an ancient map, I think it was Tolkien actually, and they said, "Can you do this?" And I'd drawn something like that before, but I'd not done it digitally. It was huge. It was 36 by 48 inch, which was the largest map I'd done. My computer definitely struggled with it. So one of the things I've been doing with the cache I've made is upgrade so that I can make bigger and better maps. But basically, it was a collaboration. They sent me a brief of what they wanted it to, the shape of it and areas, and a couple of descriptions on what each area was. And I basically built it from the ground up in GIMP. Started with the sea, then put in the landmass. It's kind of like a burger. You start with layers. You've got your bun on the bottom, and then your tomato and your lettuce. And when I first started, that was really hard. Like layers, I'd get confused as to what was where, and it gets easier the more you do it, and it becomes intuitive. But when you start, it's probably one of the harder things, I think. But
Yep.
they used it for like a tactical map, and I think they had 6 or 8 of them printed out for their players, so that they could map their roleplay movements. And for me, having not attempted something of that size, or it was a pretty significant commission. It was nice exposure. It was a really challenging map because it was so different to what I've been doing, and I really like to push the envelope and see what I can do, and I'm still trying to do that.
Yeah, that's got to be a proud project there. It looks really professional. I congratulate you on that. I'm sure the group that commissioned that are very happy with it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, they were very happy.
Okay, so what type of software do you use other than GIMP? Do you use anything else?
Um, I use Microsoft Paint, and that's it, because there's some things that the way GIMP's set up, it's really hard to do some things, like unnecessarily so. And that's the only other thing I use. And between those two programs, I've managed to produce pretty much everything. I'm really impressed by GIMP. It's an incredible program. It's really powerful, and yeah, it's probably the only thing I'd ever use.
Yeah, I've been recently introduced to GIMP, and it is pretty cool. I use it a lot to resize maps in batch format.
Yep.
So that
Yeah.
it's a really good tool for that. So do you have any current projects and work that are really sucking up a lot of your time right now?
Yeah, I do. I've got 3 or 4. Um, I'm working on some new Meander maps to go with my existing collection. I'm working on a dice kit, which is super secret at the moment. It's being manufactured, and that's like a big step for me. Going from pure digital to trying to make a concept physical, and kickstart that and send it out like a professional manufactured product. I'm pretty excited about that, and I'm also working on my RPG with I'm designing all the cards in the system. It's not like 5e or Pathfinder. It's a completely new system. I'm just trying to give it a go. It's sort of like the next logical step from where I'm at.
Do you have any help, like anyone working with you?
No, no, I don't. It was quite hard to learn how to use GIMP, but I'm a very determined guy,
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, and I think you need that because you just if you want to get into map making, you just have to be determined to make it work, and it doesn't necessarily have to work for monetary. It just has to work for you, you know.
Right.
Uh, there is a lot of people out there that post their maps and they go, "These are crap," but you got to start somewhere. Everyone starts somewhere. I started somewhere. I'm still starting.
So one of the things that attracted me to your work was that your maps actually connect for the Meander series. Can you just briefly explain how that works? I mean, you don't have to give away all your secrets, but
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. Um, so in order to stand out from the crowd, and what I saw was pretty much sewing up market, with really high quality maps and things everywhere. Why would someone choose mine? So I needed a difference, and it just came about that I thought of dungeon tiles. You get like your 8x8s and you put them together. And I thought, well, that's a cool idea, but what if you had much bigger ones? And then you wouldn't need to move them all around. And they had paths on them that would line up with every other meanders. That was the concept. So you could have two desert tiles, and these were like 27 by 18-inch massive board game sized tiles.
hmm
You could have two of those and you could make an endless desert. You didn't need 50. And the idea was that even if you had forest or you had snow or you had desert, eventually you would be able to just fit them all together and they would blend. And I called them meanders because when I first started, the paths were off center to give a sense of randomness to it. And over time, that became a bit of a problem. So I fixed it. I fixed that. So now instead of them being sort of off center or slightly different to each other, it's more like a grid. So no matter which meander you put next to another, whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, or zombie, or whatever, it will match up. So you can make huge terrains in seconds. You don't need to mess around with the tiles, the smaller tiles. So I guess that was the concept, and people seem to like it. So I made more, and people liked those, and they requested different ones, so I made more, and I'm still making more.
I like those. Those are really cool. So how can we find your work? Like, I mean, other than your website, I mean, you have your own website, but how else can we get a hold of you or find you?
I'm on Facebook. GameTileWarehouse.com is my website.
hmm
You can search for Chris McDermott or Game Tile Warehouse on Facebook. I'll pop up. If you go to my website, I've got links with other projects I've done. Um, I, I'm not really hard to get hold of. There's a contact form there if you want to ask me a question or have queries about something. I'm quite happy to chat with anyone.
Well, I was thinking about doing a Kickstarter section in the college. So would you be interested in posting links or sending those to me, and then I can just post them in there? And if students or staff want to check that out, it's right here in the college, and we don't have to go looking for it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I've got a
Okay.
list of all the Kickstarters I've done on my website on the front page. So if you're interested, go check them out.
Yeah, I'm thinking about starting that for the college, and I offer that to all the artists here that are either doing Kickstarter or Patreon. So I will definitely consider and see how that's going to work. The only
Yeah,
problem is the maintenance of them. So that's the thing. I don't mind posting them, but then we have to maintain them too. So,
yeah, that's always a problem, but you've done pretty well so far.
yep, thanks. So, do you think you'd have any time to donate to FGC as far as like coming in for an hour or making a video on your own so you could do it on your own time and just like using it for a training tool?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I was happy to donate some maps
Yep.
and wherever I can help. I don't really know Fantasy Grounds. I haven't had time to play tabletop or even virtual games. I had to go at Roll20 so I could understand how people were using maps,
Right.
but it's been pretty limited. But I am hoping to learn and understand Fantasy Grounds and maybe even try and run my RPG in development through that system so that it can be played uh, through them because I like virtual tabletop. I really like the idea, and I think that's partly why most of my projects have been digital. But
Yep.
yeah, absolutely, I'd be happy to help out. I think what you're doing is cool, and
Yep.
really glad to be a part of it. And where I can help, I will.
Appreciate that, Chris. I just wanted to say that Chris is actually a very rare appearance here, so he does not really like to be on camera or anything too much. But I'm very glad that you decided to do this.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for asking me.
I appreciate it, man. And so if you
Great
guys
having you.
are, excuse me.
I said it was great having you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Next we have Andreas.
Hello.
Hi, Andreas. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, I noticed that you started off pretty recently. Is that true?
Yeah, it's almost what is it, 6 months ago I started my Patreon.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about who you are, your region that you live in, that sort of thing. You don't have to tell us all the personal things, but
All right. Well, north of Hungary, where Map Hammer lives, there's like this tiny, tiny country called Denmark. That's where I live. So um, yeah, there's not much going on here, and so I decided to draw some maps, and it has been great with the Patreon and all. Um, but the way I got into making maps is kind of a long story. It started like when I was 25, and I'm 28 now. But even before that, when we're kids, we like to draw treasure maps when playing pirates and stuff. So it's all the way back from then I started to draw maps. But recently, um, I I picked it up, and I really like it.
so what's your role playing experience like? Like, are you playing D&D or Roll20? I mean, I'm not sure what kind of genres you're into, or.
Well, I'm actually running a campaign later tonight, so unfortunately, I have to go after this. um, well, my D&D experience is actually also it's kind of, what can I say? It's kind of hazy. In my early youth, I tried it, but I was really want to be with the cool kids at the school, and the cool kids didn't play D&D. But I was really intrigued. So when I moved and I got an education, those cool kids I wanted to be with were no longer around me. So I can like say, okay, let's try it out. Um, and it's, oh man, it's been a ride since I started the Dungeons and Dragons train. Um, it has me engulfed. It has swallowed my brain whole. Um, and I think my map making can contribute to this community.
That's great. So do you have any inspiration above and beyond yourself? Like, do you have a mentor or someone else that you've seen, or some people are inspired by movies or books or.
Yeah, like the guy said before, when you play games, like the great ones, Witcher and stuff, there's always like these great maps showing the world. But also, if you look up Mike Slay,
Oh yeah.
yeah, he's really great at what he does. And my style. Like it don't copy, but it's similar to his because I really like his style.
That's good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I actually contacted Mike Schley to see if he'd make it. I didn't think he would show, but you know, he gave it a shot.
yeah,
So
yeah. He
what
does
kind
really
yeah.
great maps.
So what is your proudest map or artistic moments? Like, do you ever get that rush or that feeling like this is right, this is what I want to do? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it was Map Hammer who said that when he first got those few Patreons, like someone really pay me to make something I like to do. That was really great. But also when I found out that there was this guy called Jerry Gretzinger. Do you
uh-huh.
know him?
No, I'm not. I'm not aware.
He's like he made. He has all these tiles where he draws on, and these tiles that there's like thousands of them, and he made like a world with these tiles. Try and look him up, Jerry Gretzinger. He made this giant map, and I tried to like copy it, but in my own style. And he has like this deck of cards he used to that tells him what to draw next. Um and it was when I picked up that we can say that style of drawing that got me hooked.
That's awesome. So what's your process like when you're working? Like right now, I'm looking at Venovia, and I'm looking at your other map of what's this Barbas.
Oh,
So
2 seconds. Oh yeah,
Taldore
uh,
maps and
yeah, yeah, yeah. The first thing I do when I draw a map is to like drawing the outline of the region, um, and then like the basic color green and blue, and then just shading lot of shading to make it look good.
awesome. So what's the usual time or length? Is it may not even be a fair question because I know all maps take different time, but what's roughly your workflow take you into? Like a week, a few days? Does that depend on the map? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. It really depends on the map and the commission. But the Taldore map, as I recently did, that took almost 10 hours to make.
Wow, that's 10 solid hours, right?
Yeah, that's 10 solid focused hours.
So what type of software or tools do you use?
I use Photoshop,
Okay. You use anything else or
pen and paper when I have an idea. I want to have sketched out, and I don't, and I'm not at a computer at the moment. I use pen and paper.
great. So do you have any current projects in work right now that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I'm actually doing a map for Dawn Forge Cast at YouTube,
Uh-huh.
one of his worlds, and after that, I'm doing Baitor, the Nine Hills.
Nice. I can't wait to see that. So when people want to find your work, I mean, what should they do? Should they look for Andreas or how do you?
Yeah, I really need a cool nickname.
Okay.
I don't have one.
I kind
I
of
really,
like your last name, Barbascard.
yeah,
I would do a play on words with that.
yeah, I could do that.
And
Um, but when I like try to make up names, it's always like rubbish or something like it's way too vulgar to be something official.
gotcha. So do you play any virtual tabletops or anything like that?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm running a campaign tonight, and that's on roll 20.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Um,
wasn't sure what the format was, but
okay. But that's where I'm running a campaign, a homebrew I'm actually doing with one of my own maps.
that's really cool. That's got to be a good feeling.
Yeah, it is.
So, in any spare time, that's kind of in quotes, in your spare time, could you
Yeah.
ever decide to come to Fantasy Grounds for a map making class for like an hour and show some students what they would need to do to get started in this type of work?
Sure. I'm
Okay.
up for it.
I mean, it could also just be a video that we post in an archive if you want to do it on your own time. Or I really like the hands-on interaction with
Yeah, me
students,
too.
and
Yeah,
that's
me
kind
too.
of how what we're doing here at the college. So we do have a few videos floating around, but I really like I wouldn't say face-to-face, but I like the hands-on approach for
Yeah,
teaching people.
that could be cool.
Yeah, and not to mention we could teach you how to use Fantasy Grounds. I'm not saying that you're going to switch to it, but I'd like you to at least see how your maps look in it and how it works.
Yeah, sure, sure.
All right. So I appreciate you coming. I know you got to get prepared for your game, as you're probably the dungeon master. Is that right?
I am. I am.
Okay. So I've just showed a picture of your artwork. So we're getting a little bit of feedback. So if you could mute, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Me?
Yeah. There's some kind of interference happening.
Oh, sorry.
It's
It's
okay.
maybe my mic.
It's all right.
It's weird.
All right, man.
Sorry about
Well,
that.
no problem. I appreciate you coming, and I like your work, and I continue to be a
Thank you.
Patreon myself, and hopefully you'll be able to donate some time and show up once in a while and say hi and get to know the community.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, really
Well,
cool, man.
thank you for having me.
No problem. You have a good night, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And next up, we have Venatus Maps. So, welcome. Venatus, are you there? Hello? Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Had
Hello.
the mute button
How's it
on.
going?
How are you doing? I'm doing well. How are you?
Hey, I'm really glad that you decided to come. I was hoping you'd make it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
All right, so we're gonna get right into this, and so I'd like you to tell us a little bit about who you are, like what region you live in. You don't have to tell us exactly where you're at, but just give us a rundown of yourself a little bit.
Sure. I am a Chicago-based artist in the U.S., obviously. I have a background in the fine arts and graphic design. I'm currently a high school art teacher, actually, and do the maps on the side.
That's awesome. So you have family and friends and all those sorts of things that you have to attend to as well?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. All right, so what's your role-playing experience background like? Like what's that?
I'm actually relatively newer to Dungeons and Dragons compared to a lot of other people. I only got started about 2 years ago, once 5e kind of exploded a little bit, and started dungeon mastering a group of my own. And that's kind of how I fell into starting to make maps for our campaign, and then more or less kind of grew from there.
Awesome. Um, have you played any of the other genres before that or after?
No, unfortunately, I haven't had any experience with tabletop RPGs before that, really, which is sad because it's something that I would have really loved when I was younger. Um, Grew up, reading and playing video games and enjoying board games, but somehow never quite made the soiree into tabletop.
Awesome. Well, sounds like everyone's got into this hobby for various random other reasons, so that doesn't surprise me one bit. That's really cool though. So right now your main genre is that just Dungeons and Dragons, or are you looking into other stuff or?
I have a small amount of experience with Pathfinder and a couple of other ones, but it's definitely predominantly fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Awesome. Now you realize that we're all waiting on Starfinder to come out for Fantasy Grounds platform.
Oh, are you?
Oh yeah. So that is something that the college is really anticipating. We're hoping that'll come out here in the next month or so.
Gotcha. And I assume that is sci-fi.
Yep, it's kind of a sci-fi fantasy mix. I guess you'd call it fantasy science fiction, or I guess it's a kind of a cross genre.
Gotcha. And when is that scheduled to come out?
There's no hard date, but I was told in about 3 to 4 weeks, roughly.
Gotcha. I'll have to see if I can pay attention to some of that. I've been interested in getting into potentially some science fiction based stuff because primarily I've been more in the kind of traditional Tolkien fantasy realm so far.
hmm Maybe we'll have a discussion about that someday.
Maybe.
So, what's your main inspiration, or maybe a mentor, or someone you follow, or that you have seen, or anything in your career as an art teacher, even?
Yeah. In terms of inspiration, I mean, like I said, I like a lot of people grew up ingesting a lot of fantasy based content and pop culture. As far as my personal inspiration right now, a lot of the work that I make is for our own campaign setting that my group plays through. And so a lot of it is kind of as they explore and arrive at new locations, or as we kind of develop new villains and plots for them to work through. A lot of the maps that I end up making are in response to that or in preparation for where I think they may go, and that ends up getting shared with others to use.
Awesome. So, as an artist, or as somebody that's kind of doing your own thing on the side, did you have a aha moment, or a moment where you knew that what you were doing felt right, as far as making fantasy maps for role-playing games?
Yeah. I mean, certainly the positive feedback and the supports is obviously something that others have mentioned and something that is inherently helpful and encouraging, and helps me to keep moving forward with it. But I think the first instance I mentioned that I started with a group of our own about 2 years ago, and I really think it was just that world building aspect of it that I hadn't really broken into individually, and just the act of creating a setting and imagining these places and visually recreating them for others to participate in was really what just kind of drew me in from the beginning. I would still be doing this even if it wasn't something that I had a Patreon for or a following around. Maybe not quite as fervently as I do currently, but that inherent initial act of creation and sharing it and having it be responded to with my players was the first thing that kind of got me going.
Awesome. We're partnered up with the World Anvil, so if you'd ever want to check that out, I mean, this is obviously a plug for that, but I definitely believe in that world building aspect of it, and that is something I'm going to be looking into further. And I would encourage you to do the same. And it's basically where you would manage a campaign. And I think it's a good idea to collect all your thoughts and your your artwork and your assets to to a centralized location, and you can have people collaborate with you if you have to in the future.
Yeah, I think World Anvil, if I'm not misremembering, may have reached out to me previously, but I've seen some of the stuff that they've put together so far, and it's obviously, as a lot of people have recognized, a very high quality, a really great organization system. I'm especially interested in their ability to nest images and maps and areas within bigger areas is always something I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm really into that too. I like the idea of being able to take all your maps and tying them together and things. That's really critical for me.
Yeah, that's kind of been the common thread. Like I said, documenting our campaign setting, going from kingdom maps to regional maps to cities, towns, all the way down to individual buildings and battle maps, and the ability to kind of nest those within each other and make it more manageable and easier to navigate through is something that I'm definitely interested in.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, Fantasy Grounds can kind of do that, and there's an author, I believe he's located in Australia, Deluxe Oz, and basically it's an extension where you can drill down that deep into the organization of your campaign world.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll have to give that a look then.
Yep, it's really really unique. So what type of software or tools do you use? Do you use everything or just one specific, or how does that work?
I have a couple of casual sketching programs that I might use on the fly as I'm developing or thinking of different ideas, but primarily I'm almost always entirely in Photoshop.
Okay, no problem with that. I particularly use GIMP, but I use Corel. I use everything I get my hands on. There's some things that do things better than others, so that's why I jump back and forth.
Yeah. GIMP is an excellent alternative. I'll sometimes maybe dip into Adobe Illustrator or something like that to kind of help facilitate things. But Photoshop is definitely what does most of it for me.
Nice. So, do you have any current projects and work that you can talk about?
Yeah. I've always got projects. I release about 5 full colored maps every month. And so always working on one thing or the other. Right now, I'm working on the first of what will be a 3-part series of maps that I'm working on in collaboration with one of my patrons on a sort of interplanar laboratory / dungeon that I think will be really cool. The first one is going to be out soon. Let's see. For the last few months, I've been working on creating a battle map scale rendition of all of the rooms from Castle Ravenloft from the Curse of Strahd adventure.
Nice.
Yeah, and as well as just like I said, the various maps and locations from my own campaign setting.
All right. So, if we wanted to look you up, how can we find you? I mean, obviously you have a Patreon, but some people don't even know what Patreon is. So, I'm hoping that this stream will help with that. And are you up anywhere else other than a Patreon type thing?
Well, like others, I'm on Patreon. I can break that down for us if we want to, but
Hmm.
I think probably the best site for seeing all of my stuff, because I have several public posts on there, but a lot of that is for the people that are supporting me on there. For anybody that's interested in just seeing the work itself, I document it all on a Tumblr that you could very easily find just by Googling my name. Yeah, so it's all on there. It's about a month delayed or so behind what I post in the day to day, but everything from the last 9 or 10 months or so is all up there.
Wow. Actually went and did a little research on that. I took a look at some of those photos. They're pretty impressive. I really like your work. Um, I think it's most of the people here, or if not all, are fairly close to having that professional touch, or if not already looks professional. And that's kind of in the eye of the beholder. So from all the years that I've been exposed to fantasy maps, I think that you guys have a pretty good handle on how to do a lot of this stuff.
Well, thank you very much. That's nice of you to say.
Yep. And so I have your links here, and I wanted to ask you, since you are a teacher, is that correct?
That's correct.
I would like you, if you can donate some time to the college, come in here, run a class once in a blue moon, and show the students in the community here at FGC how to make maps, your process.
Yeah, I would actually be really interested in that. One of my goals for 2018 is to kind of go back to what was one of the original goals when I started the Patreon campaign of really focusing on educating and helping other people kind of do what I like to do so much. And that has a few different things that I intend to do in terms of like worksheets and guides and videos and whatnot. But guest starring, if you will, in a class of yours would definitely be something I'd be interested in.
Yeah, we'll totally promote it and do it right. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, keep in touch. Come into the community once in a while, say hi. You don't have to be an everyday member, but
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming, Venatus. Like I said, if you guys want to stick around later and talk to each other after the stream, you're welcome to.
Cool.
I'm going to go to the next artist. Thanks for coming by, Venatus.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
All right. And we got Zovia up next. Zovia is an artist that I was introduced to by the community when I first started playing Fantasy Grounds. And I really adore her work. and I like the colors, and I can't say more than that. Than other than that, that's just awesome. So Zovia, welcome.
Hello.
Hey, so if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about who you are? I mean, above and beyond the mapping and the.
Okay, a little bit about myself. I do live in the U.S. despite the accent. My parents were Serbian. I live
Uh
in the South, the deep South U.S., so I'll have a little bit of redneck mixed in with that.
huh.
Yeah, that always depends on how much I've been drinking, though, of course.
So what's your role playing experience like? Like what types of games or what
Um,
can you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah, sure. I started playing tabletop games when I was like a teen, and but most of my friends, of course, they didn't want to play so much, so I was the DM. So I've got a lot of experience in DMing. More recently, I've met people online with virtual tabletops. So that's kind of like a savior. And then I've actually been able to play in games as a player, which is nice.
Yeah, I agree. That's nice.
But I do have a lot of most of my roleplay. I mean, I get a lot of roleplay playing in the games, but I also spend a lot of time playing PC games,
Oh,
and
okay.
I spent a lot of role playing in online games.
Nice. So what's your main genre or game of choice, or do you have any favorites?
Oh, I do have a favorite. I've always been a sci-fi fan. I've always read sci-fi books, listened to watch sci-fi movies. I've always been a big sci-fi fan, so I like to play in sci-fi games. But of course, fantasy is much more popular, so you play what you can.
Gotcha. Yeah, we're really waiting for Starfinder, so I'm hoping that I get to play in a game with you at some point in the future.
That is good. I'm already in a game with Starfinder, fortunately, so that's been.
Nice. So what's your main inspiration, or do you have a mentor or anything like that?
No, I don't really have a mentor, but what really got me into making the maps is, of course, I needed the maps for my own games, and I just because I didn't. My problem was that a lot of the maps weren't detailed enough for me. I know there's a school of thought that, and I can understand it, that you don't want to have too much detail in the maps. That there's the detail should be in the story that you're telling. But also, once I get into a map, I like to feel the mood in the map, that you can almost smell it when you're there. You feel the tension or the ambiance when you're in the map or when you're looking at it from a player's point. I guess that's from my time from being a PC gamer.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. The immersion is what you're looking for.
Right, exactly.
So
So that's what really made me start making the maps to begin with.
that's awesome. So what was your aha moment, or when you really felt good about your work? Maybe your proudest moment. You know that feeling you get. You get. I don't know if you get this, but as an artist, and even myself, I got that rush. It's like a natural release of adrenaline or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, I'm not. I haven't been an artist very long. I've only been doing this maybe about 3 years. But I originally was. I just self-taught myself painting, uh, watching YouTube videos, and that's what I used to do the maps. So that's why it kind of has a painted style to it.
That's really cool. Like I really like your use of color and also the contrast. You have the right balance. And I'm really liking that ship that you shared with me, and I have that up right now.
Yeah,
And
that would be my proudest moment. That one took a lot longer than the other maps, probably a couple of weeks to do this one, and and my own enemy is myself, of course, because I've tried to put so many details and things, and sometimes I have to step back because it starts to lose that painted look. It starts getting a little too detailed.
mhm.
But this map, I had a lot of fun with the shadows, or I do with most maps, but this one was very intricate with all the ropes and ladders. And
Yeah, I can
the
see
maps, the
that.
things that appear above the ship that you don't see, but they still need to cast a shadow. That gives you a sense of the depth for it.
That map is incredible. By far, I think that is one of my favorite maps that you've made. And I also like the way you presented it with the cutouts and things. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
thank you. Mine too.
That's a really cool process you have. Did you do some research when you made the ship? I mean,
Yeah, I do a lot of research. I mean, I like to think I know what I'm doing because I played enough games, but I find that a lot of things are not very realistic. So I do a lot of research on things before I draw them or paint them. Even if I'm doing like a mill, a warehouse, or
mhm.
anything like that, and especially on these ships, I did a lot of research on the ships,
Y-
on what the individual parts were and what they were for and what they were needed for, and the size, width, all that sort of thing.
So it's definitely an educational process while you're building this stuff. So I think
Yeah.
that's really admirable. I like that. So what's this process like for you? Like, are you using GIMP or Photoshop or Corel or any of those tools?
I just use Photoshop.
Okay.
Long ago, I bought a copy of Photoshop. I mean, it's a really, really old copy, but it doesn't have all the perks that the newer copy has. But that's good. Photoshop, in a way, makes it a little accessible because you can literally rent Photoshop for $10 a month.
Right.
I don't agree with the fact that they won't just sell it outright too, but that is an option if you want to get in Photoshop and don't want to spend a lot. You can rent it by the month.
Or you can use GIMP if you learn how to use that.
Yeah, I did try GIMP for a little while. That was before Photoshop did the online thing, but I'd already been programmed to do Photoshop, so I was already used to that system.
Right. So what's this process like for you, like when you made this ship? I know you did some research and then what'd you do, sketch it out, or I'm not sure how that works for you.
Yeah. First, what I'll do is I'll start out with a grid with a certain amount of blocks, maybe like 30 by 20 or something like that. I don't. I mainly make these for virtual tabletops, like Fantasy Grounds, for example.
Hmm.
And so I don't want to make them too large because I know that that can be a drain on your memories
Hmm.
and transmitting the maps to your players, and just bigger is sometimes not always so good. So I just make them smaller. But I generally want to start with a size. Now, when I start sketching it out, I just have the grid on there and just do a rough sketch of what I want, because I know I need corridors to be this big, and if possible, you want monsters that are going to be in this area. Are they going to be able to move through the place realistically? All that kind of stuff you need to lay out first. And being a DM, that kind of helps.
Yeah, I noticed that a few of you use that Dungeon Master background to envision and help sculpt what you're making, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's true. So once I have that, then, well, in the case of the ship, I had to do a lot of research first about how big they are, and then you need to make it so players can move around realistically on it too, because there's the grid system. So with a combination of those two things, made it sketched out, and then I just start putting the textures in. I'll paint textures, so like large textures, like the water, for example. I'll make that so that it can repeat. That makes it a little easier.
Yeah, I imagine it. I'm sure you got a lot of shortcuts and techniques to help you get your project
Oh,
going.
I wish I had more. But a lot of the work comes from painting the individual pieces, because on my Patreon I also offer, with the maps, all the little props, like the cannons, the bullets, barrels, and stuff. So, and blank versions, so you can move things around if you want, like not to be specific for your story. So making all those additional assets, that's what takes time mostly. For each map, I try to put some new things, but of course, I can reuse a lot of things from map to map if it's warranted.
That's cool because you can always recolor it, right, or reskin it.
Yeah, that's true. Working digitally, that helps a lot. Um, But once I get everything put in place like I want it, then I start going in with the lighting and the shadows. And for me, that's the funnest part because that gives it the pop, makes it look more realistic.
Yeah, I agree. I used to get confused about the origin of light. So when I was making these types of maps with a digital product, I would use a shadow, but then it would always be facing the wrong direction from the light source. So that to me has always been a difficult challenge. I can think three-dimensionally in layers. I'm actually studying to be a machinist, but as far as light goes,
Oh,
I
cool.
have no idea. So
Well, what I usually do is I'll start drawing some lines. That way that I know which direction the light's coming from. That way it can be consistent, everywhere. Because if you don't have that, you'll get really lost.
I agree. I get totally baffled by that after a while, especially something this complex. It looks to me like you've taken a lot of time to lay that shadow in there, and that's not an easy task for me.
Yeah, this one had a lot more shadows than typical, and although all the props that I make, I can't put any shadows on them. I can't pre-bake any shadows into them because in one map they might be turned this way, and another they'll be turned another way. So I have to put the shadows in last at the end, paint everything in with the shadows.
Wow. So honestly, what do you think the total amount of hours or days that this map took you, this big ship?
Well, this map, typically I do work full time on this, but I do have some interruptions sometimes, of course, like everyone has. But this map took 2 weeks to make.
Wow.
Typically, I can get the map done within a week or less.
Okay.
I'm getting better at it. The more assets that I have, and of course, the more experience that I have at it. Some smaller maps with not so much detail, I can probably get in 4 days.
So what's your computer like that you're using?
Oh, it's a pretty good computer. It's pretty beefy because that's it's your main tool. And if it's going to slow you down, that's going to make things harder for you. So I do have a PC, loads of RAM, and a good video processor.
Nice. So for
Because I also play PC games, so I need to have that.
yeah, what I find interesting is people configure their whole system around a video game as opposed to forming their whole system around everyday use.
Yeah.
So
Well, fortunately, Photoshop has started making their program to work and utilize GPUs.
yes,
So that's a win-win for gamers that
no
want
doubt.
to also be Photoshop artists.
Awesome. So do you have any projects that you can talk about that you have in work right now that's taking your time right now?
Yeah, I'm on my third map this month for my fantasy maps, and this one is going to be pretty cool. I doing something really different, and I think it's going to be pretty epic.
Nice. So I heard that
Oh,
you go
also,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I should also mention that this highly detailed style of mine is very niche,
Hmm.
and I realize that a lot of people are not into it. So I've discovered a new love, and that is drawing the maps ink style, ink and watercolor painting style, like some of the other guys that are on here too. So I've started doing maps like that as well, and those are really fun. So I've got that other style of maps that I'm making.
Yeah, I noticed that on the Patreon I got a message that said that you've started a new line of drawing and coloring, and also that you've made your own store, and that's not an easy task.
Oh yeah, that store took weeks to, but I needed a place for people to get past the maps and organize them in a way that because when I release a map, I release it in multiple alternate versions. Like some might be nighttime, some during the day, some empty, some not with grids without. Like if I do a dungeon, I can get pretty gory and bloody, and I know a lot of people play with kids and they don't want that, so I'll do like a version that doesn't have any gore or blood in it.
Well,
So I have
that's
all those options on the website. So if you don't want to get the whole map pack, you can just pick the one that you like.
I particularly like the gore, so
Right.
being a dungeon master and all. So other than Patreon, so you got a store where we can find you. Are you on any of the socials, like other than Patreon and your own store?
Um, Twitter and G plus,
Okay.
but and mainly just post updates there.
Okay. So you do both fantasy and sci-fi, is that correct?
Yeah, my love is sci-fi. I realize that the market, craves and begs for fantasy, so I give them what they want. But I also like sci-fi, and it's not very popular, unfortunately. And I had to spend the same amount of time to make those maps, but I do like it. I do love it. But I hope to get more support there, or else I may have to drop it due to to time. Um,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of time to make these maps, and if I can't pay the bills with that time, I'm gonna have to put it somewhere else. But I really like making the sci-fi.
Well, once this Fantasy Grounds is out officially for the Starfinder rule set,
Oh, and
and
I can't wait.
I can't either. So once that happens, like I said, I'll be willing to promote that science fiction side for sure. I mean, everything you have, obviously, but I would definitely like to have the science fiction featured, especially the maps. And I think that you have done a great job with what little tools that you have. Like you said, you're using an older version, and I
Oh,
think that's great.
I started, but I do use the current
Okay,
version.
okay.
Yeah,
Well, still, I mean, that's pretty impressive that you taught yourself in 3 years. I mean,
yeah.
look at,
Just YouTube is great.
and
People
no
put a
doubt,
great tutorials, and I learned about light, shadow, colors, complementary colors, all that
and
sort of stuff. And I'm always learning,
I've
as
heard
everyone.
nothing but good things from the community. I mean, Digital Dungeon Master, GeoQuester, everyone that plays online on the streams, Rob Tui, everybody loves your work. So I would keep it up.
Yeah, those guys are great too.
Yep, and I'm a fan also. So I'm glad you showed up. Thank you for coming, Zovia.
Thank you for putting this together. It's a lot of hard work for you know for everyone
Oh yeah,
besides yourself.
oh yeah, a lot of work, and I appreciate everyone coming. So I'm gonna go to the next artist, and that's Dyson Maps Logos.
There's no maps in there, just station logos.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
So, if you can just tell us a little bit about who you are, etc. Doesn't have to be too personal, but I'd appreciate that. So, what's going on, Dyson?
I'm an old school D&D player. I started playing in '79. I remember because the Dungeon Master's Guide wasn't out yet. So it was old. It was before first edition was fully out. In 2000, so I've been drawing maps since '79, but in 2009, I had a player in one of my groups who drew maps, who would draw maps as a player that were just, he added this crosshatch on the edges that I thought was fabulous. And it was a, not the crosshatch I use, it was a straight 3 lines, horizontal 3 lines, vertical, horizontal, and so on. But it made me realize that I really, there's something about a hand-drawn map that draws me. And at the time in 2009, we were looking at a field entirely of digital maps where everybody was drawing digitally. All our top artists were, the top cartographer was Christopher West, who still was an amazing cartographer, and Skeleton Key Games, Ed Burrell was also stunning, but it means that they have it was very clearly digital work, and there wasn't any of the old hand-drawn maps coming out anymore. So I started putting them on my blog and slowly getting better at them that way. And so yeah, what I do now is I draw maps. I draw 3 maps a week, sometimes 4, and I play. And when I'm not drawing maps, I'm playing role-playing games. I am living the dream of just gaming full time or doing stuff related to gaming full time.
That is really cool. I'm really glad to hear that most of you guys can do this full time. That right there is just a testament to your passion and to your support. So that's
Oh
a
yeah,
cool thing.
Patreon changed the play field entirely. In 2013, when Patreon launched, I was the 3rd RPG-related Patreon campaign on there, and the first cartographic one. And I expected that within the year I'd be up to the point where I'd be making $100 a map. Within a few months, I got to $100 a month. But yeah, I flipped that on its head, and 2014 onwards, I paid my rent with the income from Patreon, and the last 2 years, all my bills have been paid for through my patrons, which has just been amazing.
That is really good. I mean, that's an awesome thing. I really hope to aspire to get to at least pay for my hobby. That's what I'm looking at right now. So, do you have a specific genre of choice, or do you like all of them, or how does that work for you in the RPG market?
When I draw fantasy maps. I draw Dungeons and Dragons maps. It's not my preferred genre for reading is science fiction. I can't stand fantasy novels, actually. But I play mostly Dungeons and Dragons, and Cyberpunk and Vampire are my big games. But my maps are all fantasy maps. That's where my style and technique mesh in best with the role playing game environment.
Nice. So I myself, I'm an R. Talsorian veteran, so we'll have to talk Cyberpunk someday.
Fabulous game. Absolutely one of my top 5 favorite games of all time.
And I hope that video game does ever make it out, the one they've advertised lately.
Oh, 2077. If
Yep.
that makes it out and is paired with the tabletop by Mike, we may finally see a Talsorian resurgence.
I wouldn't doubt it. So, do you have any other inspiration or mentors, or is it all just from within, or is it all from what you've read, or I'm not sure how that worked for you?
My influences really go back. Like I said, there was the one guy in our group, but when I'm looking at the style that I work with, it really goes back to there's 2 cartographers in particular. 1980, Dragon Magazine had the Halls of Beholder adventure in it, and the style is very similar to. It has a really sharp, long hatch cross hatching that I loved. It's it's a map that has stuck with me forever. And unfortunately, the cartographer is uncredited in that article. And Rick Barber from who did work in the early and mid '80s for Chaosium, for the mostly for the Elric and Stormbringer lines, the Octagon of Chaos and the Tower of the Dead. His work is something I really wish I could emulate at the time. I did not have the technical skills for, which is where I got to. But so those are like my big influences there as to what got me into it. But while a lot of people look at my work and identify the quote-unquote Dyson style as being based on that cross-hatching, really the style is a lot more involved than that. Obviously, it's also big on avoiding the use of single-line walls, and I try to go into multi-level design, or at least a lot of Z-axis work in the single-page map.
That's awesome. I really liked your site that you have, I guess it's like a WordPress site, and it has a bunch of your sketches, and they're incredible. I like the personal touch. It's natural. It has that analog feel to it. I really appreciate that too.
I am 99% of my work is, or 95% I'll go, is straight to ink. I never pencil anything in. I draw a map, and when I'm done drawing it, I scan it, clean it up a little bit in Photoshop, like literally it's just contrast enhanced. And nowadays I do I cut it straight to black and white, so I could release a 1200 DPI PNG of it. But it's pens, paper, and a scanner, and that pretty much is what I do.
That's pretty unique. I mean, most people are using digital assets and things like that. So that's definitely an interest for me because it is unique, it's different, and I don't think a ton of people are doing this as far as professionally anyways.
Well, there's a lot of people doing it this way now. I'm going to sound a little full of myself here. I changed the scene in mapping from 2009 to 2013. We saw a big transition in what you saw when you're looking for D&D maps on the internet. And it suddenly transitioned away from the digital maps to a lot of people doing their hand-drawn stuff. And because people were doing it all the time anyways. And that's how we made our maps for our home games, right? You sat down and
Right.
drew a map. The visible presence of my work and its rapid dissemination and the amount of work I put out. I do put out 2 apps a week, so there's a lot of variety and visibility there. Did change the feel of things. The point where people started calling it the Dyson style for the style of maps I draw, and there are a number of cartographers who put out material that, if you don't look for the signature block, is hard to determine who drew it between myself and about three other cartographers, where you won't know the difference offhand.
So, do you have any proudest moments or artistic moments in your life and your experience that made you go, "Damn, this is what I want to do. This is me. This is my time." I don't know if you've ever got that rush that people get when they have done something great for themselves, like an adrenaline rush kind of thing.
Yeah, I can't post it to the Twitch stream. I got to post it to over here. There's not the Christmas just went by, the Christmas before.
Hmm.
I've been arguing with myself as whether or not I was an artist or a guy who drew maps. I'm always saying I'm not. I'm not an artist. I'm just a guy who draws maps. I'm not even a cartographer. I just draw maps on the side here. And then last Christmas, I put together a map for our D&D group, and I put out a map for our D&D group of the campaign we played up to that point,
Hmm.
and I put it in classroom 1 here, and maybe someone else can cross it over to the Twitch stream also. And it is a 24 by 36 inch map of because I play old school. We start off with a very small map of the region, and as new stuff is needed for the game, we'd expand the map outwards. So it was an overview of everything we'd done over the last year, a year and a half of gameplay, and it was. I knew at that point, hey, I'm an artist. I'm putting this out as a Christmas present. I spent 8 days drawing it. It went through several drafts to get to where it was, and I was very, very proud of it. And the other big item was getting cold called by Wizards of the Coast to draw a map to do work for them, where I didn't go to them. I literally got cold called by them, asking me to work for them.
That's a good thing. That's a big step.
And that was huge. I got, fortunately, it wasn't a call. It was a Twitter DM, and so before I responded, I got up out of my chair, ran around the room a few times, screaming and laughing. Ran into my girlfriend's office, into one of her. She's a YouTuber and does video game recordings. And ran into her room, interrupted one of her recordings, scream at her for a bit, ran back into my room, and finally answered the message.
That is incredible. That's a really good story. I think that anybody out there that wants to get into this field, do you have any advice for them? I haven't asked any of the artists here, but since you've kind of made it up to that echelon, you got any advice to give them?
It's the same advice I use for Patreon all the time. Don't create to make money, or don't create for the platform, and don't create for other people. Create because you love to create, and that love, that the energy you're putting in that way is what comes out and makes people love your work. Yeah, it's not going to appeal to everybody, but the people that it appeals to, it's going to appeal to at a deeper level, and your love of your work will shine through in it in the end. And that's important to me, and it made a big difference. It's the difference. And it also means that in the example of the Patreon campaigns, you're not caught up so much in trying to make money off Patreon. Your main thing at this point is you're making art, you're creating, and people are in time going to follow through with and get into the swing of it with you. And sometimes it takes longer than other times, but really the most important thing is to love what you're doing and just keep doing it.
That's awesome. I mean, that's kind of in line with what I'm doing with this Fantasy Grounds College. Is that yes, I have a Patreon. It makes a little money, but the main thing is the art of building the community. And so
Yeah,
I feel that with my heart, with passion. I've made a lot of time sacrifice for it, and I really think that I really believe that we should all come together as a group as opposed to different entities. And I think that we are also the consumers of this product. So we can control, or we can also influence what is coming out next. And so I think that with that in mind, that we have a pretty powerful start here at the college and beyond. So I really appreciate your maps, Dyson. This is really cool. But I wanted to ask you, so your process is just basically you just sit down and start sketching on graph paper,
I
or
I don't even sketch. There's no first draft for 95% of my work. I sit down with my pens and produce a final piece in one run.
wow.
Um, it's for at least half of my work. I literally start with a simple concept of I want it. I want this to have I want a two-storied hall here with a mezzanine. All right, so we'll start with that, and then we'll go out from there and figure out how it will tie into other things and what the final look will be. But I'm figuring that out as I'm drawing.
That's really cool. So that's coming right from your heart, from your brain to your heart to your hand.
Yeah, yeah, and then in the middle of drawing, I'll pause in the drawing to do some of the cross hatching as I wait to figure out what the next step should be. I've got on my YouTube channel, which there's links in I leave in the next slide. There's a number of my maps that you can watch me draw from beginning to end. You can see how I'll be drawing walls and I'll suddenly take a break from drawing the structure to go in and add some details and throw in some cross hatching. At that point, I'm letting the structure solidify in my head so that I know where to build the next sections.
That's awesome. So other than just using your pens and pencils and things like that, what's the scanning software like?
So I started off dirt poor when I started doing this again. In 2009, I literally had a scanner that I had. It was a broken printer I had acquired off Kijiji. This was a working scanner on the top of it. That's how I'd scan my work, and I was using a $140 netbook, and I had no internet, so I'd go to the library to post them to my blog. At that point, I was using GIMP again. I'm a Photoshop user in general, so nowadays what it is I take my final piece, slap it on one of the two scanners in my room. My office has two flatbeds, a regular size and a ledger size flatbed that I'll scan it on, throw into Photoshop, clean it up a little bit. There's not a lot. I do a little bit of contrast enhancement, but then I do a threshold cut, so it just goes it goes to pure black and white before I save it as a PNG graphic, and throw it up online. Although the PNGs are too big for most social media sites now, so I have to go through an extra effort when I do a promotion where I produce a 300 DPI version for the social media
Right.
with a link to the 1200. But hey.
So I heard you say office. You have an office now.
Oh, I have. Yeah, I have a nice I have a nice 3-bedroom house that we're paying for through Patreon. My girlfriend's office is next to mine. It's her office, my office, our bedroom, and
Okay.
then full house. So,
I was
but
gonna say.
no, I'm not renting civic office space. No, I've got dedicated office space in my house for doing the work.
Okay, I was gonna say some people say, yeah, I got a little studio, and it's actually just a corner of the room or something. But when you said office, I was like, wow, you've really stepped up in the world.
No, it's my studio effectively. It's a computer desk, three tables with either maps or role playing games on each of them, and a mini fridge to keep me hydrated.
Good. That's a good thing too. Most people forget that after 10 hours on the computer.
Oh no, I go through about 5 to 8 liters of water a day. So
great
as I draw.
So
but yeah, no, I draw 3 maps a week, and I'd say I put in about in actual drawing time, maybe 3 hours per map, maybe 4 hours per map. A lot more time is spent at this point on maintaining the level of inspiration required to keep it going. So I make sure I play role playing games 2 times a week at least, and run one time a week at least.
That's important. I'm starting to lose focus on that, and I need to have that back in my life more because I'm doing a lot of focusing on the college as opposed to my family and also my running games and things.
I found a really important part, especially as a creative, is to not, whereas most of us came in here as people who ran games, it's important to keep, one important trick that really helps keep creativity up is to play the games instead of run them. Get on the other side of that screen. I make an effort to be on the player side of the screen at least half the time that I'm gaming now.
Yeah, I haven't done any gaming, to be honest with you, other than I run a Sunday game, and I've been invited to do a lot of play tests and one shots, and I've turned people down because I'm just working on the college. And I think over time, when I start getting more people involved, I can do more of that. So do you have any projects in works that you can talk about? Like anything cool or upcoming or?
I actually, I mean, I set myself up because I know I don't work well in January, February. I set up very well to get all my projects off my plate before by the end of November. So I'm looking forward. I spent all last summer drawing for one project, which was ridiculous and time consuming and exciting at the same time. And it's something I can't announce yet because it hasn't been announced. So I'm waiting on the announcements to come out. But that was a huge part of the summer. I recently had an adventure released by Wizards of the Coast through their as the introductory adventure for Xanathar's Guide. Uses one of my map. Uses a map that I had that they commissioned from me, and there's more work coming down the pipe that I'm excited about that I did last year. This year, I slide through the first 2 months of the year, draw a few maps, and then build up my speed again. I'm right now. I'm about 30 maps ahead in my production.
That's
I
pretty
release
good.
2 a week, so I've got another 15 weeks before I actually have to knuckle down and work my ass off again.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you hibernate a little bit in the winter, like the rest of us.
I totally do. I burn out. I really put into high gear in the fall. I try to keep it going through the Christmas season, but of course the Christmas season has its own set of perils and pitfalls.
Right.
And then I take a few months of burnout time after that.
It's a good idea.
I usually play a lot of video games during this period every year.
You get some sleep, I hope, too.
Oh, I do. There is a specific benefit to being self-employed, which includes a 9:30 alarm clock.
Nice. Yeah, I got to get up at 5 in the morning every day, so I'm still on the clock.
Nope, not going to happen.
So, how can we find your work out to the public here?
I've got this lovely thing that's you put my name and type .com at the end.
Okay.
And you hit my website.
Nice.
I have a unique enough name that it's fairly simple to work with.
Nice.
And from there, there's links to my Patreon, my map collection, my general blog, and from there you also find my YouTube and stuff. There's I do a lot of putting my stuff on social media. My works in progress show up in my original, where I started everything, my Google Plus stream, which is for all people who say the Google Plus never caught on or was a ghost town. My success is attributed to my work on Google, my exposure through Google Plus. But also it's on my Facebook stream, my Twitter stream. I put it on Pinterest, and of course my blog.
All right, cool. So I'm really glad you showed up, Dyson. This is a really unique opportunity. I appreciate you coming and spending the time, and also for your support with the mapping. Mapper's Delight is what I called it, but it's actually just a big Mappers Summit and a big commercial for everybody. So I'm hoping that you guys will come back and hang out once in a while and touch bases with the community. I'm not expecting you to be here every day, but pop in once in a while, say hi, and see what the community's doing.
Will do. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it, guys. Okay, next is Anna B. Meyer.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Oh, good. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So I guess I'm going to get right into this and ask you, a little bit about who you are as a person.
Well, I'm a Swedish gamer who I grew up in Sweden, and I've been gaming since 1979, and I moved to Southern California almost 7 years ago. And I've been mapping for a little over 20 years. As a hobby, I started mid 90s, and professionally, I've been mapping about 5 years now.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
Um, so I heard that you've been making a lot of maps in a three-dimensional environment as opposed to just top-down, and that's really cool. But I want to know what your role-playing experience is like before we get into that.
I'm started old school with D&D and Traveler and a whole bunch of Call of Cthulhu and the games of the early 80s and the first wave of role-playing games. And I played pretty much everything that was out there, but fantasy and D&D was my go-to game, so to speak. And when I ran games, I Greyhawk was my world. So I ran D&D games in Greyhawk, but I played I think almost everything on the market over the years. But more and more fantasy have become my mainstay, and I don't play in as much as I would like to, but I've been playing on and off pretty much at least several times a year every year since 1979. So I've been playing a long time.
It's pretty active then.
Hmm.
And so your main genre was Greyhawk and D&D, is that correct?
Yes, when I ran my game almost exclusive that way. I run game at conventions and organized play and stuff like that. But when I run my own home games, I go back to my Greyhawk version of Greyhawk, so to speak. That's been my go-to. But when I'm a player, then I usually want to play something else. I don't want to play in Greyhawk. I want to play with whatever other worlds and experience things, new games, new game styles and stuff. I run very sandboxy games myself. So I really like to try other styles of gaming and see what they can bring and learn techniques and tools and trades and get inspiration, so to speak.
That's great. So do you have any other inspirations, or a mentor, or perhaps a family member, or anything from your early days that you can
Oh,
remember?
and when it comes to my mapping, it's my dad was a photographer and he did a lot of nature and landscape photography. So I think that was my first kind of inspiration when it came to landscape. I was very visually oriented, always been. And then I've been doing a lot of navigation. I've been a pilot for many years, so staring at landscapes from above have been a passion of mine for a long time. I'm an avid hiker, and I go out and love to experience landscape firsthand. And that kind of I combine that with my fantasy, meaning I love to visualize what the world looks like, not just dungeons and villages and small areas. I so far my main focus and work have been the large scale. What does the world look like? And I want to visualize that. I want to give gamers this is a world, play with it, so to speak, and put stuff in it. So that's been my main thing. And I start out in 3D, so I visualize a world in 3D. So one third or half of it is 3D programming and setting up 3D tools, and then the other half is very artistic, painting in Photoshop and then do symbols and text and stuff in Illustrator. So I work with probably about a dozen tools in that fits various niches and kind of yeah. So it's kind of a complex workflow that I've tried to work with over the years to and it's a very evolving field. I work with completely different set of tools that I used 5 6 years ago, and now it's a new wave of tools coming out. So a big part is learning new things. I spend at least a day a week on doing that.
That's awesome. So do you have any proudest moments or any time frame that you can think of where you went, ah, this is really what I want to do, or this is my passion? You know what I mean? Like that
Yeah,
moment.
yeah, the originally was when a software called Bryce came out, and I realized now I can visualize 3D on my PC. That was the first one when I realized I need to get into this, and that was back in 96, 97, and that's kind of brought me into it. And I realized I need to learn everything I can about this. So I did it as a hobby for years, and then my other big moment was when I was working on stuff,
Daddy.
and Wolfgang Bauer reached out to me and say, "Oh, can you start mapping Midgard for me?" That was the next. I realized, wow, I'm getting called, I'm getting an email and saying, "Can you do that?" And he contacted me, and we chatted, and I started working for Global Press doing Midgard. And probably a few months after that, I simply put my Greyhawk. Finalized my big map of the Greyhawk game world that I just did as a hobby project. It was no intention of selling it or anything. I started before the internet came out, and then I realized it was complete. And someone suggested you should put that in for the Ennies, and I was like, it's not even a product, but I put it up there as a fan map, and I was nominated for an Ennie, so I had to go to Gen Con, and that's how it kind of started. So since then, I've been doing mapping full time. Yeah,
That's really cool. That's a good
yeah,
story. I think that unintentional success is the best, I think.
yeah.
I mean, it is great. I know it's your passion and your hard work put into it, but it's also cool when you're recognized from afar and you didn't really have to push it too hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like previous mappers have said here that it's the you need to do what you're passionate about, and you can't do this in order to earn money. I need to earn money so I can continue to work. That's how I see it, and get enough money so I can sit here and do what I love to do. That's the. But if you have a motive of earning a lot of money, you're in the wrong business. This is a hell of a lot of work for not that much money, but you can live off it if you work hard and you have your niche and you treat your fans well and so on. Then you can make a living out of it, but you will not get rich from it
So I think a
compared to
lot of
other
us
stuff.
forget to take care of ourselves too when we're doing this. It's like
Yes.
we're
Oh yeah.
sitting around being
Hmm.
stagnant and not
Yep.
exercising and moving around. So
Hmm.
I'd have to say you've kept yourself in good shape. I think you're aging very well,
Thank
and
you.
I really appreciate that you have showed up here and that you have spoken to us about your work and your dedication to the artwork and to the community. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So,
Now, oh, go on.
oh, okay. So I'm looking at a map here that's an island from the Fantasy
Hmm.
Map Maker. It's a three-dimensional top-down.
Yep.
And so, what's the process like on this?
First, I use for this one. I use one of my main tools when it comes to visualize the 3D terrain. I use World Machine. I also use View and TerraGen. Those are three tools that actually work where you can actually create 3D terrain. And then from then on, I render that, so I get the elevation data, I get the basic texture, and then I take the texture into Photoshop, and then I start touching it up on Photoshop and inside Photoshop, and then I use Illustrator and put the text and the tags and all that stuff afterwards. And I also adjust the final rendering image and so on. So it's kind of a little bit of back and forth. And sometimes I do things in Photoshop, textures and whatnot, and I feedback that back into the 3D software again, so I can kind of render things, tweak colors and textures and stuff. So it's kind of a feedback loop. So half of it is kind of artistic, and the other half is very much programming.
That's awesome. Do you ever use scanning to create your own textures?
And not by hand. I've actually used textures. I've taken pictures with my camera out on like forests, and I use a lot of colors from my own images, so I get the mood right and the colors right. Meaning, I want to have from a seasonal temperate part of the world, I take the colors from that, or I want to have a desert landscape like the one I have, or half semi-desert. So I take colors and I take inspiration, and so I get the right color tone and the warmth and stuff like that, depending on the what type of terrain I'm going to map.
So usually, what's the workflow time for a project with this three-dimensional mapping? Like, I know that's not really a fair question because everyone has a different way to work, but
Yeah.
generally, what's the gist? A month, a couple weeks, one
It
week?
depends on the size for me, number of square miles. The island map that we're looking at the moment here is about 60 by 60 miles. And that has taken me about a month, so let about 100 hours or something like that to do that. And
Wow.
it's almost finished. Yeah, it's about 100 hours of work in it. But on the other hand, if you then, but half of it is programming, meaning now I can crank out probably 10 other islands fairly quickly in 10 hours each. So it's basically like you do in Photoshop. You get your assets, and my assets are half of them are Photoshop textures and colors and stuff like that I use in Photoshop, but the other half is also 3D programming. So once I've set up the programming and have that template done, then I can crank out other similar types of terrain with the same type of texture. Meaning, if I set up this case, I set up coastal areas that are temperate, that have certain amount of percentage of forest and stuff, and I can crank out similar projects much easier or much faster.
So before we go on to the tools and stuff, can you briefly synopse the story you told me of how you met Doug at the conventions?
Oh yes, that was back in the early days of Fantasy Grounds. I kind of one of the early beta testers of Fantasy Grounds when it was started by a Finnish bunch of Finnish guys. I think they had a company, and that was one of the first virtual tabletop tools. So I started using it a little bit, but the problem was that they were kind of ahead of the time because there were hardly any players. And the second bit that kind of threw me off originally was that it was so hard to put in your own rules, or tweak the system or tweak the software into doing it your way. And you had to learn a lot of Java or scripting and stuff, and that wasn't into that. So they kind of fell through the cracks. And then at Gen Con, I was actually, when I walked past and I started chatting with Doug a little bit, and then I simply realized that he upgraded my license to the new version of it, and I was kind of back in. And I've tried it a few times, and I really love that it's one of the virtual tabletops that has more of a real game table feel to it.
Hmm.
And I realized that virtual tabletops will be, they're now a mainstay of my gaming, whether I'm being gaming at a table or online. It doesn't matter. I use digital tools. My gaming has gone completely digital. I look up the rules. I use everything. I barely even use a pencil. I just sketch on my tablet or my computer with a pen. And if I take notes, so I've gone almost completely digital.
I'd
So
almost consider you a pioneer of this
yeah,
field here.
yeah, I'm also looking into the future, like using game engines like Unity and others, that you use tools that you use for computer games, and also the tools that I'm using 3D to create 3D terrain and stuff are the same tools that you use in Hollywood movies and others to in computer games. And I've also done some work for computer games too, and I done for novels and stuff. So not only um, tabletop role playing game, but that's where my heart is. But the same technology can be used in many other stuff. I've done real world maps too, using the same technology. And I think that tabletop role playing game, virtual tabletop, will become 3D. In a few years' time, then augmented reality will come. So you can sit around the virtual tabletop that actually is a virtual tabletop, and you can sit at your desk or your table, and you can see the landscape or the miniatures or the dungeon or the village. And so that technology is coming fast. So I'm kind of preparing myself for that future already.
Yeah, I agree. I remember, just like 5 or 6 years ago, I couldn't figure out why there wasn't enough of this stuff out already. I thought we had the technology then, but apparently not.
No, the hardware has to catch up too. We've had the basic software has been around now for 20 years, but the hardware is just barely catching up. My mapping has always been, I've been kind of fighting Moore's law. I bet on Moore's law, saying that I need a better computer in 2 years, otherwise I will simply grind to a halt. I can't. It takes too long to render it. And the Greyhawk map I did, that's the big Flanese map. Then
Hmm.
that one is 110 by 116 inches
Wow.
at 300 DPI. So it's enormous, and that means that you need a computer with 64 gigabyte of RAM just to load it properly when you
Wow.
work with it, and the file is 33 gigabytes, just the terrain image in the background.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so and also a lot of rendering. Now, right now, I'm rendering the final of that island project you showed, and
Hmm.
it's been running for 23 hours and 11 minutes, and it's about 35% through, which means that I have to have a dedicated. I have three desktop machines, and I have one dedicated 3D machine that is basically just crunching renders in the background.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so that way, and I have to have one to work with. So if one is stuck rendering, then I use another one to work with, and I use a third one for all my social media and email and all that stuff, because I don't want to lag down the computers that I'm doing the work with.
So it's
So
almost
it's
like you're data mining for Bitcoin with those
yes,
things.
exactly. Yeah, it kind of brings up the electricity bill for a bit.
I
Yeah.
bet. So, do you have any projects and work that you can talk about that we should be looking for?
Uh, First of all, I'm moving. I've been using Patreon now for a few months. I've only had one published project, and the other one is soon to come, like within a week or so. And so that's been. So right now, I've spent about a third of my time doing that, and the other one is my main thing so far is commissions. But I hope that Patreon can be a much bigger part. I would like to do 2/3 or 3/4 of my time devoted to Patreon, because it's more fun. I can do the things that I'm really passionate about, and I can do it straight to my fans. That's something I would love to. So my next thing I will do is I will start working on Lendor map, Lendor Isle with Len Lekofka. That was the original creator of it. So that's part of the Greyhawk world. I would do that for my patron. And I'm also working on a secret thing for Cobalt Press. That is going to be a marketing thing, or kind of, it will be more than that, but it will be something cool that Midgard fans will love. I'm working on that too. So
Awesome.
those are I'm working on at the moment, and then I have a couple of other commissions I can't talk about yet, and that will come later this year. And I'm also going to start doing some projects together with Darlene that did the original Greyhawk map, and
Wow.
they will be fun too. That's a kind of really awesome that we can work together on things.
Yeah, I can attest personally that Anna is not afraid to get her feet wet and her hands dirty, because she's actually reached out to the community and has connected with some of my players that I've known. So I really appreciate that, Anna, and you've actually made a difference in just the small group that I had been gaming with recently.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really appreciate that. That's that hands-on kind of attention to your patrons that needs to happen.
Yeah, and one of the big thing for my patron is not for me to do maps for the patron. That's half of it. The other half is I want to teach my patrons to do what I do. So the top pledge level, then you get all my source material, you get special instruction videos, and I'll help out in your projects too. So I have that kind of that's the big thing, because I don't want to be the only one doing this. And if it's a bigger pond, it will benefit me too, and both for inspiration wise, and I also want to be able to tackle bigger projects. So I'm looking for people to collaborate with. And in order to get that, then teach them yourself. And that's what I'm doing through Patreon and stuff. So it's kind of a recruitment tool too.
That's awesome. I
Yep.
kind of believe in that too. I think a good number of my patrons are also teachers and volunteers here,
Mhm.
so that's a good thing. So, how do we find your work?
My website has been it's ghmaps.net, and also my Patreon, that is patreon.com at Anna B. Meyer.
Okay. I was introduced to your maps by one of my students and also a fellow gamer, and she was a big fan of yours, and so that's how we found about you. But we didn't know you had a I don't even think you had a patron at that time. And then over the time, I said, you know what? I want to get her in touch with Anna, because she was a big fan of yours, and she's the one that introduced me to you through the web page that you have,
Hmm. Yep.
and that's what started that whole thing. And now you guys have a bit of a camaraderie. You're working on stuff together, and I think that's
Oh,
awesome.
oh yes, that's wonderful. Yep. Yep. We started chatting almost daily about projects, and so we have a whole bunch of interesting things coming up. So yeah, she will be a great help, and she's a wonderful friend. And
Yep.
hopefully we can get together at GaryCon in like a month,
Oh
or
yeah,
in
that's
March.
right.
Yep. Hmm.
So
Yep.
that's where you're going next, right?
Yes, that will be my next convention, and then I might go to PaizoCon, and I will probably almost definitely go to Gen Con, and then might be a few more cons this year.
Well, if you go to PaizoCon, I live in that area. I'd definitely like
Hmm.
to have lunch with you or something. So we'll
Oh,
talk about that.
yeah, we should definitely do that. Yep.
I could show you around and stuff.
Hmm.
Not saying you've never been here, but I can show you the
Well,
good
I've
places
only
to eat that don't cost tons of money.
Oh, that's wonderful. We need that when we work in this business. You don't get like overly wealthy, but it's fun. I'm living the dream, and I just yeah, I'm really I know I'm privileged that way that to be able to do that, and it's wonderful. Yep.
Maybe
Like
I'll have the wife make some home cooking. That nothing beats that.
oh, that would be wonderful. Yep.
All right. So nice to say hi to you again, and
Hmm.
hopefully you'll come back into the community occasionally and say hi
Oh,
to everybody. And
yeah, definitely.
all right. So appreciate it, Anna.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Amai. She has recently started up her own mapping campaign, and I met her back in October, and I would like you guys to meet Amai. She's also a active student and also a gamer. So, hi, Amai.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
She was really nervous about coming on today, but everything's good.
I'm like the baby compared to everybody else.
Well, baby's got to grow up someday, right? So, can you tell us a little bit about you, like as a person? You don't have to get too personal, but just give us a little idea about you.
well, I just recently, actually, I'm fairly new to all of this in general. Like I barely got introduced to D&D and tabletop gaming. mm, I want to say about 8 months ago, and I started playing with, as you know, Duff over there, and that was my first game that I ever got into, that I was invited by a friend, and I was playing it for about 2 months before I really fell in love and just got so sucked into it. Um, and the more I played, the more I wanted to know the creative aspect of it and how everything worked. So I went ahead and started doing some research on map making, and about 2 months into gameplay, I just started to research and have fun with it.
That's cool. So, do you have a lot of stuff to do outside of this, like your family and friends and all that good stuff?
Yeah. Well, I was going to school full time for a while, but I did graduate in 2017, and then I had gotten a job. So there's some, stuff that takes up a lot of my free time for that. But for the little free time that I do have, I try to make different types of maps and try to make uh, just create in general, because I'm a graphic designer by trade. So
Awesome. So, what is so your RPG history is pretty recent, is that correct?
yes.
Okay. So, if you had to say for genre, would you stick with fantasy or do you like anything in particular? Like, have you tried any of the other systems other than D&D?
um, Not yet, really. I've just been exposed to 5e. That's literally all I've been exposed to, but I have been looking through other things. And I know that there's a sci-fi thing out there, but I haven't dabbled on my own exactly just yet. But it's definitely interesting, and I would love to, see more of it, because I have heard about the Starfinder stuff, and I have no idea what that is. And I think it's the best when you're just kind of blind and just kind of jump right in to figure things out. So,
Yeah, we're definitely going to be gearing up for that. We are actually gearing up for that in college. So that's not the
yeah.
only outlet you'll have, but definitely we're going to be having some of that. So, do you have any influence or motivation about your artwork itself? Like, was this something you did as a young woman? Like, you colored and, well, I mean, what was that like? Your influences or motivation for artwork?
Well, when I was young, I kind of was very Like I knew exactly what I wanted to do as soon as I saw something related to it. Like I as soon as I was able to get
Right.
on a computer and as soon as I could figure out how to draw on a computer and do digital things, I knew exactly what I wanted to do and I wanted to get into design. And I stuck with it all throughout my middle school, high school, university. I knew exactly what I wanted to do and it worked out for me in the end because I I do a lot of branding and logo design and all of that, all skill set helped me I guess, pick up on map making pretty quickly. Because I do consider myself like such a baby. Like, literally have less than a year of all of this experience. But I just love to jump right in and just figure things out. And yeah,
There's
it's pretty
nothing
fun
wrong
stuff.
with that. Actually, you got this community behind you. You also have your friends and people you game with. So I would keep going. I wouldn't, definitely, I wouldn't give this up for anything.
Yeah.
What's your example of your proudest work, or it doesn't even have to be an example. It could be like a moment. Like, was there a time where you actually felt like, yeah, I can probably do this, or this is something I want to do?
I think that my the thing that I'm most proud of right now, as far as D&D, is that I made my own homebrew game.
Wow.
And I just yeah, I completely just kind of sat down and started writing because there was someone in the stream from the game I play, and I was telling them how I like to write, and they're like, if you like to write, you should try writing a campaign or like a game. I was like,
Hmm.
is that really how it works? And like, is that really how it goes down? And they're like, yeah, give it a try. There's such a thing as just random homebrew games. Go for it. And so they gave me like the motivation to give it a try, and I ended up doing it. I made my own little homebrew game and I made all the maps for it. I made my little tokens for it. I just kind of went from scratch and made it, and I've had it ever since. And I actually am going to start making another adventure connected to that homebrew. So I'm gonna hopefully keep continuing to do all of that writing, map making, and creating modules. I think that this is my little niche right here.
Awesome. So if you ever want to play test that or convert it to Fantasy Grounds, let us know. And
Oh
we'll
yeah.
we'll definitely help you with that. So what's your workflow like when you do your maps? So do you just kind of do it off the cuff, or do you plan it out, or I'm not sure how that works for you.
I think it's really similar to Dyson, where I start I just start kind of blank with what I'm like general ideas of what I'm thinking of, and then go from there. And it I find it to be the easiest way for me to work because I'm kind of bad at trying to sketch out previous ideas. So I just kind of give myself a nice clean slate and then kind of mold, as I go
Hmm.
and see what comes out and, then make tweaks along the way.
That's awesome. So what tools are you using?
Um, Since I'm a design major, I know the majority of the Adobe Creative Suite, so I use Illustrator, Photoshop, all that good stuff.
Nice. So do you have any projects or work in progress as far as art or map works go?
I am working on maps for the other um, game that I'm creating for my previous first homebrew game that I made. So I'm trying to get that collection of maps out and more situational maps, uh, so that I can build my library since I'm still pretty fresh in the game. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to get all that stuff out.
Right. So don't be shy or afraid to ask the community for help with Patreon and things like that, because it takes a little bit to get used to that. So that's
Yeah.
one of those things. So I wanted to let people know that Amai was actually the first student who had donated her time to Fantasy Grounds and to the college for her artwork. So she actually had the first folder, or one of the first folders I can remember, that we created for the artist. So something we're doing here at the college is that we make a folder on a shared Google Drive, and for each artist that donates, we'll take that information and give that to them so that they can monitor what's in that folder. And
Mm.
so if there's anything in there they don't want in there, or if they change their mind, they can delete it and walk away. I mean, that's kind of how we have it set up for the donations for the college. And mainly we do it for teaching, for making battle map scenarios for our students, things like that. Um, Mostly it's just the artists themselves and the staff that have access to it. And we actually, asked them kindly if they wouldn't distribute or to share that with just everybody. So we try to make that fair. So if any of you mappers want to donate, that's kind of what we have set up. And I really appreciate you, Mai, for coming here and getting past your shyness and sharing your history and a little bit more about you. So we can find more of your work on Patreon. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it's all pretty bare bones right now. I just started to give myself a um, a little bit of a foundation, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I just made this Patreon fairly recently, but I'm hoping that I will be able to put up maps and also character illustrations because I will be collaborating with my boyfriend who does a lot of illustration work and animation work. So hopefully you'll find more than just maps up there in the
Awesome.
near future.
That's awesome. That's cool to hear that. I think we had
Yeah.
another author here. I think Mike from Maphammer has a similar situation where him and his girlfriend work on art together.
Yeah, it's really helpful since we're both creatives. I can get feedback, and it's nice to have another set of eyes. To be like, does this look okay? Does this make sense? But yeah,
Awesome.
it's exciting to be here, and I'm so happy. Thank you for the honor to
No
invite
problem.
me over.
I'd like to see you come in once in a while if you get time.
Yeah, I know. I should be having more time to do that come in the next month or so. So
Okay.
here's
I'll hold
hoping
you
I'll
to
pop
it. I'll keep
in.
bugging you until you do.
Yes, please, yes, bug me because my time management skills can be a little bit off. So don't
Okay.
be shy.
I
I guess
won't.
I should take my own advice, but yeah.
Yeah. I will not be shy, trust me. I really appreciate you coming, and just to let people in the stream know that Amai is actually a student, but also a contributor to Fantasy Grounds College. So by having her here and also promoting her work and also introducing her to the community, I'm hoping to get her Patreon going. And I'm going to offer you the same thing I'm going to tell the other authors here and the other artists is that if you have something like this and you're really proud or you want to get it going, a Kickstarter, a GoFundMe, whatever it is, if it's related to fantasy or any sort of game design, I'm really not opposed to putting that somewhere in here so that the community here can have access to it. And we have over 1,200 people here, so we have a pretty
Woo.
good footing here. So just to kind of throw that out there to you guys. Any questions of the college since you're here?
Oh, for me?
Yeah. Do you have a question for me?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's much of a question, more so than just a statement, because I remember just like when I first joined a few months back at the community and how much smaller it was, and now it's just grown so much and it's so well organized, and it's really cool to see like just the community that is just dedicated to help everybody and just have a good time, and it's just really great. Like I was so happy to see how much it's grown.
Yeah, it's
So
it's really grown exponentially. Roughly, we're
yeah,
getting anywhere between 70 to 100 people a week.
that's so awesome.
And I think at the end of the year we hit 1,000 members. And
Wow.
most of them are active. I mean, at any given time, there's anywhere from 200 to 350 people active at a time.
That's so cool. I'm
Eh,
so happy for you
And we haven't
guys.
lost too many people, so the retention level has been like 95%, which is phenomenal.
That's always good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
well,
it's
I'm
just
happy that
having people
helps.
like you here helps that for sure. And I look forward to seeing your upcoming designs and your participation, and also to see what you come up with next. So thank you for coming by and talking to us.
No problem. I'm hoping to donate a couple more maps in the future, most likely, the more my library grows.
All right, appreciate that. All right,
Yeah.
so we're going to go to our next mapper, and this
Hello.
is Flo here. He is a prominent member of FGC. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, Flo.
Yeah, I'm Flo. Um, Contrary to everybody else, so if Amai is the baby of this group, then I guess I'm the stepchild, the unloved stepchild, because I'm the only one who makes maps solely for myself, actually. Or, well, I've donated all my maps to the FGC, but I do not make maps to sell them in any way or to distribute them in any way. Um, Yeah, I'm pretty well. I know quite a lot on how to set up good maps from a DM's perspective, not necessarily from a how do I draw really well perspective, since art is not my strength necessarily. But that didn't stop me.
That's awesome. So what region are you from, Flo?
So if we have Denmark in the north and Hungary in the south, right between those two things, there's a small country called Germany. That's where I'm from. But currently I'm sitting in the UK.
Oh, okay. And just so people know that you have a fairly decent role here, you are the map expert. So let's explain how that worked.
So, right when the FGC started, I was probably one of the first people to join. I joined within the first week of this entire project starting,
Hmm.
and people were asking for tutorials on maps and where I can find help to create maps and so on. And I was making my own maps, but I didn't really consider myself an expert. But I just said, well, if nobody else is going to do it, then I'll just start my own series. I have been running some map tutorials last year. They are just starting up right now again. So next Sunday will be the next session. And I split them up into three groups. There is session number one, which is overworld maps, then the session number two, which focuses on battle maps, and then session number three, which should be coming this year around, is city maps. All of these have different philosophies on how to create them, in my opinion. So I try to keep them separate and give people a chance to see every single one of them.
That's awesome. So for the community and for the public at large, Flo actually helps keep the college on course. He's kind of like the de facto moderator when our other moderator is busy. So I am considering giving him a moderation role. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, Flo keeps things in line. He lets me know when I'm getting out of order and doing too many things.
When you're using too many at here and at everyone tags.
Yes, I'm the worst one. So yeah, and he does. He keeps an eye on things for me from the European standpoint. I'm trying to grow the European Union and getting more instructors and people involved in that region and in that time zone because he's getting hammered pretty good. Usually when it's busy, I'm at work or, just waking up. So I definitely want to try to get him some more help and maybe alleviate his role to doing more of the stuff he wants to do. And when Starfinder comes out, I'm afraid we won't see much of him, in at least in the
Well,
capacity now.
actually, what I believe will happen is that I'll start classes on Starfinder then. But I'll try
Awesome,
to get that in. Yeah.
nice. So, what's your history like with role-playing games?
So I actually only started role-playing games around 2.5 years ago.
Hmm.
I come from a really tiny, small village with around 200 people living there, so finding a group is basically impossible. But now, so when I'm not doing Dungeons and Dragons in the Fantasy Grounds College, I fire at cells with lasers. So I work in research, and because of that, I ended up in London. And here it was considerably easier to find a group. So I joined a group. I played for around 2 months. It was an open session, so anybody could join when they felt like it, and then we would just distribute the new people among the DMs that were there. And we had groups that were 9 to 10 people per DM, so it was way too large. And then I said, okay, I'll step up. I'll become a DM, and have been DMing since. I run two games. I have my Saturday game, which is Don King's Thunder, and I have another game, which is my own rule set, which is loosely based on 5e and plays in a space setting. So basically, there is the space station, and my players are trying to build that one up because it's pretty ruined at the moment.
That's cool. I didn't know that you were that deep into the Dungeon Master side of things. I knew you ran games, but I wasn't sure how that was. That's awesome. So, do you have a particular favorite or RPG world or genre that I understand it's sci-fi, but is anything specific?
That's really difficult for me to answer since I have been at it for only like 2.5 years. And when Starfinder was released, I was like, wow, Starfinder is the coolest thing ever. And then Borfrin, who is another member here at the FGC, was talking about Savage Worlds, and I took a look at Savage Worlds, and that one also looks incredibly interesting. So in general, the settings that I like are low magic, so preferably no magic at all. So people actually need to use the items and the abilities that they have at hand to complete a task, and can't just say, "Oh yeah, cast that spell that does it for me." I always find it way more interesting. But yeah, I don't really have a favorite yet, or I wouldn't feel comfortable saying this is my favorite because I haven't experienced enough yet.
Okay. So, do you have any influences or motivation for your work that you've done so far, like your DMing and your artwork and stuff?
So I mostly make maps for my sci-fi game, as you can expect, because
Hmm.
fantasy maps are actually really well represented. So if I need a fantasy map, I can find them online.
Right.
And there, each game that or each session more or less that I'm running is set in a different setting. So right now they just went through Mass Effect, and what I do then is I look at Mass Effect maps and turn those into maps um, in my game. Now, Ferret for the Portal game, slight spoiler here, so listen away if you are trying the Portal game, asked me for some more maps that I can contribute. And I was thinking, okay, what game has a lot of space shuttles? And I figured out, oh, Faster Than Light actually has a really nice art style. So I basically took those as inspiration and recreated it. So for me, it's usually I look at what somebody else has created and then change it to fit what I like.
Awesome. So, what's your workflow like? Like, do you have any examples in your short career that you've had that you felt proud of or happy with, I should say? So, do you have any
Um,
ideas of what those moments were?
I had one map that I drew up within probably 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And I have to say, that map is my favorite map that I've made so far. This is for a previous game that has ended by now. This was my first campaign that I ran, and everything, the honeymoon phase of I will create everything on my own. I know exactly what I want to do. Um, and it was train tracks. And what I've done is I've put two train tracks next to each other, and my group was traveling on one train track, and on the other train track, enemies would drive past, either going in the other direction or following up, and then my players and the enemies had to basically catch up. And I made the map in some way dynamic, so I could actually move those trains back and forth. And it was really fun to do that while you are in game.
So yeah, that's a cool moment when you discover a mechanic or something that works well with your group. That's awesome.
Yeah, and they in the end blew up the train tunnel. So usual end.
All right. So, do you have any projects in mind in the future that you want to do other than hang out in
Um,
college?
Projects at the moment, Savage Worlds that we get this one running, and Starfinder. That's the two big things.
All right.
I do not really intend to ever sell my maps because I don't. I Yes, my maps are not terrible, but I also so great that I would sell them. Maybe
Right.
I'm a little bit silly there, but so yeah. But if you ever see a map of mine and say, "Oh, I really like that map. Where can I get it?" Just PM me. I'm happy to send it to you for personal use. That's no problem.
Awesome. Um, just a quick thing about your classes that you're running here. I don't know how many community members have attended Flo's classes, but I have not been able to make one. And the reason for that is usually when he's running the class, I end up running a class myself over the top of it, and it interferes. So I'm going to make a vow to you right now, here live on the stream, that I will not interfere with your map classes anymore, especially if you hold them on Sunday, because traditionally I'm going to be running my own campaign and I won't have time to run a class. So I'll make a truce with you now.
Okay, we'll see whether this works out or not.
Yeah, well, I've made this promise about 3 times and it never worked.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. If you're interested in more the theory behind map making, so the classes are less on this is the software and here's how to use it, because I feel like any software that is available online has really good tutorials already on YouTube. So I don't know if I can contribute all that much to it, but more how do I design something for my players? Because what you want to do, just to give a short taster, already think about what encounters are going to happen in each room. Do they have enough space to move around? Do my enemies have enough space to move around? How are the attack ranges between groups? So you should think about a lot of things before you even start making your map if you specifically design it for your campaign. So this is basically where I will go a little bit into the information in my classes. If you're interested in that, try me.
So what is this class called? What's the title?
Um, the title is "The Mappening is Happening," which is I don't even know how exactly I came up with it because I think it was on a Facebook group where I'm in. I was writing, "Oh yeah, I'm making some maps," and then "Oh yeah, you're mapping," and from there it just went on, which then in the end turned into "Mappening is Happening." So yeah, this I honestly don't know how in the end I got to that specific title, but I really like it.
I do
Um,
too.
and and the title is map making for the artistically challenged. So the software that I'm using allows me to avoid drawing anything myself. So I just have to put my tiles together. And that's why my maps actually look relatively decent. Otherwise, they would look even worse.
That's awesome. I like the play on words. You know, your native language is not English. I mean, obviously you have a handle on it, but for a German speaker to do a play on words like that and make come up with a title is incredible. I really appreciate that.
You should hear my wordplays in German one day. You just need to learn German for those.
I like your sense of humor too. All right, so we got one more individual coming up. He is also a member of the college, and his name is Pro Nobis. So come on, Pro Nobis.
He had to duck out for just a minute.
Okay.
For the rest of the day, he had something personal come up.
Okay, no problem. So basically, that brings us to the end of our presentation. I want to thank all the moderators for helping me here. And if there's any questions that need to be asked or answered, this would be the time to do it. I think we'll take the next half an hour to do that or less, depending on how many questions there are. And then after, if any of you artists are still around, I encourage you to stick around and I'll quit the stream and you guys can go ahead and do what you're going to do. So, any questions in the stream, please ask. If the author's not here, I will try to get you guys in touch with it. So, if there's any questions for our mapping community, that would be great.
I just would like to comment and say that I did find Map Hammer's night and day style was pretty cool. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I like that too.
I like how everybody's different. You know, it's not like you come on here and think, oh, it's a bunch of mappers and they're all the same. Everybody's freaking different. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the thing I really enjoyed about that was that they all had a different approach and a different influence to get them where they are now. So
Right.
that's a really good thing. And I think that the community really needs to have a grasp on how the maps are made to maybe have a more of appreciation of it. And they'd probably be more likely to support these individuals knowing that they're not, most of them are not like these top dog paid, you know, people that are in the industry. They're actually started low and they work their way up. So I like that. I appreciate everyone showing up and participating. So if there's any questions on the stream to any of our mappers, I invite you to ask while we have them here. If not, then I will end the stream shortly, and so I'll give some time for people to ask questions, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them. If there are no questions, then I will end the stream and we'll start the reception for the mappers.
The Mix House has a question for all the mappers, I guess, or in general.
Okay.
Who installs the grids? Who installs the grids on the maps when they are published? Is it an artist or is it the publisher?
Good question.
That really depends. I generally put grids on my own maps now as I put them out. What we don't do is most of us don't number our maps. That's usually done by the publisher.
Okay.
Would you guys say that there has become a much bigger need for gridless maps in the last couple of years?
I'd go the other way, honestly.
As one who does realistic maps, I would agree.
Awesome.
Seems to be trending more to the simpler maps, as far for what I see. And as far as grids, for me, I do it with or without grid because I know a lot of people use VTTs, and some people don't want to use grids on them, and I just offer both ways.
Same.
Yeah, I have seen, there's so many different ways, but I have noticed everything from that to some people will just put gridless and then put a square so that you can kind of draw your grid around the square to get the right grid that they use to design the map, And I can understand
right.
if you're making a map and you're using a grid to design the map, it makes sense to leave the same grid there. But then again, if someone's doing like VTT, you might want to make it larger or smaller. It's according to the situation, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So any other questions from the stream that you guys can see?
Just a big thank you from all the presenters.
In the discussion of grids, I was very confused because in the past, because I used to draw most of my maps gridless, and the biggest request for grids was coming from people using VTTs at the time, which I thought was unusual because most of the VTTs allow you to add a grid. But as people were saying, no, we'd like grids on these maps, so I started putting grids on them at that point. Because you'll see, most of my old maps don't have them, and until I started drawing these little fine grids I've been doing, my latest maps have the grid drawn in pen, as little crinkly stone bits and masonry and stuff. And until I started doing that, I would release my maps in a form with grid and without.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of your maps, you have kind of tried to disguise the grid sometimes with environment, which is kind of
cool. That's nice to do. I know personally, as me as a player, I like grids, especially during combat, because I'm a very technical player and I like to have that grid.
Yeah, I'm old school and I play entirely theater of the mind. The map exists purely as in my games, my maps exist as a DM tool to describe environments and to help describe what the place looks like to the players. The players never see the maps.
For me,
go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
For me, since I do mainly large overland maps that covers vast areas, then there is often a certain amount of users that want to have a grid on it, often a hex grid or sometimes a square grid. So I usually put that in when I do PDF version of it. I put a layer on it that is grid so people can remove it or not, so they can have it visual or not. So I always make a non-grid version, and then I make another version with grids. But most publishers don't want grids on their large area maps, and I tend to avoid it because it gets cluttered, and especially when you start having like hexes with numbers on them, then that tends to kind of things disappear behind them. But I can see the need for it at times. So I often so far all my big projects have had, except Midgard, have had a grid version as well as a gridless version.
What's the digital age? It's so easy to put it with or without. Just go ahead and let people decide.
Yep.
In virtual tabletops, I'm not sure how Roll20 is, but Fantasy Grounds kind of has a 5-foot square type thing going on. So it's kind of hard to make a map with 10 feet squares and changing the scale. So that's a kind of a limitation, I believe, of the current platform. So I don't know if. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I've noticed there's been a trend in a lot of the RPGs going from the 10 to the 5 foot. Growing up for the last 30 some years, that's always been 10-foot squares, and now it's nothing but 5-foot squares.
Right.
As these games change the rules,
Yep. So anybody have any other comments or questions?
Yeah. Boffin mentioned in the chat, I think it's funny, no one mentioned hexes. That's the untalkable elephant in the room, hexes.
We love hexes.
Yep.
So hexes can be confusing to most people. How many hectares or acres or whatever those were? I never knew what that was. I always get confused.
Oh, the campaigns that I play in. Sorry, the campaigns that I play in, we actually call them hex tiers, and it's a user measurement in the campaign setting. It represents 1 hex.
Okay. Well, I mean, is it 6 miles, or I mean, I get confused.
That's my favorite, is a 6-mile hex, but standards include the 10-mile hex and the 30-mile hex.
Okay, got it.
It's 14 million bananas.
Exactly.
I think the idea behind 6-mile hexes was that can actually be traversed in a day of walking. Essentially, that was the idea behind that 6-mile hex in the beginning.
Right, but that's probably subjective to terrain and weather conditions. But
yeah, of course. But that was like an average kind of thing.
Right.
And Pathfinder introduced the 12 miles hexes in their ultimate campaign. So in the Pathfinder world, that's become kind of a standard.
Wow.
Yeah, I took a look at the Starfinder hex.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm making a comparison between Starfinder and EVE Online in terms of ship size. Those space hexes would be roughly 5 kilometers in that case.
Metric system. I don't think this U.S. people can use that. We don't use that enough.
The calculator, you can.
It's easier the metric is a lot easier than Imperial, so we should switch to metric.
I agree, but it's just in the machining course that I take, they teach us both, but
we'll get right on that.
But in fantasy worlds, I like miles. In my D&D games and my fantasy gaming, I like the miles and the square miles and stuff. And feet. I love that. It kind of part of the immersion for me.
It feels more rustic in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
For my sci-fi 5e based set, I decided to make each square 2 meters by 2 meters instead of 5 feet. I deeply regret that decision because now I have one rule set where it's 5 feet per square and another one where it's 2 meters per square. Not a good idea. So mixing, not great.
Yeah. You guys have any questions of the college while you're here? Any questions about Fantasy Grounds College or Fantasy Grounds or anything like that?
How can somebody start a class in the Fantasy Grounds College?
All right. So basically, how we have it set up is when you come to the college, you come to the welcome screen, and it drops you into the general chat, which is the college chat. And normally that's your introduction phase where you're just kind of getting the hang of things. And one of the stumbling points that most people that come in there, first of all, they're trying to learn Discord. Now, I would say at least half of the people that have come in here have never used Discord. And if they have, they're not that great at using it. It's one of those things that you have to learn as you go. So there are tutorials online for it. We don't really teach a class here in the college for Discord, but we do have a link that takes you to the Discord training. But once that becomes a less of an issue and you start figuring out the navigation of the college, what happens typically is people will come in and hopefully they introduce themselves, and we try to have people greet them at the door. And what we do is we direct them to a section in the college called Class Planner. And that is a read only for posting for staff and people that are offering lessons. And so what happens there is they'll put the time zone, and we work with UTC in the college so that it has a format that it's international instead of just being the United States. So anyone listening, if you're in the college and you don't have the UTC code, that would be very helpful. And so we use the Zulu format. So for instance, I'm in the Pacific Rim on the west coast of the United States, so I'm -8. We try to use that format so that we have an idea of what region that you're operating from. And we'll take that and help to group you with the right group of folks that are in, because we kind of have 3 waves of people come in. We have, for me, in my time zone, I have a bunch of people coming in at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then late in the afternoon, like around 12-ish, which is probably about 3 o'clock on the East Coast. And then we have a ton of people coming in late at night, like after 9 when I have to go to bed. So I imagine that's Australia, places like that. So you come in, you ask for a class. If there isn't one offered in the class planner, what I do is I refer the students or the new folks to the subject channels in which they can post, hey, I need this class. This is the days I'm available. And what I've encouraged the staff members to do, the volunteers that we have, is to go in there and pick up those people or connect them with the right people at the right times. So that's basically how that works. And then what we'll do is we'll get you up on the table. We'll train you how to use the interface. And a majority of our college is centered around 5th edition D&D, but we're working on changing that. So if you want to play a different genre, it may take a little bit longer to get you a class, but we're working on that. We're getting more interest and a lot more volunteers to work in those other genres. And like I was saying earlier, we're definitely going to have a Starfinder thing. So if you guys are interested in alternate game systems, definitely you want to check that out. Anyway, so that's how we do that. And if nothing else works and you can't get a class and you don't have time to take the classes when they're available, then we have a self-help section in which you can watch videos and kind of follow along with the videos. And the videos are not professionally produced. They're just basically a copy of a class. And we have community members such as Rob Tui, GeoQuester, Baboonsky here is a streamer. We have a pretty good network of people that kind of know what they're doing. So even just asking in the general chat would help you. And not to mention that we have a really world-class tech support here. It's called Ask the Expert. So if you're playing Fantasy Grounds and you're having a lot of issues, we have Zacchaeus. He's from the official Fantasy Grounds Smiteworks website, and he hangs out here quite a bit and helps people live. So when you need that live question answered, you usually get it answered right away or within a day. It's phenomenal. And also the hands-on training. Some people like to learn by just being, led by the hand through the process, or some people like to read the manual and do it that way. And I don't know too many people that do it that way, but there are some. And then also there's people that like to just watch videos. So we're trying to offer all those different avenues of learning Fantasy Grounds. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very, very much.
Yep. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, I think I'm going to wrap this up. unless there's a last minute question. It's almost the top of the hour. So I want to welcome and thank all of you for coming here. This was something that I've been trying to work on for quite some time. I've been talking to Flo about this for a few months, and he and I were trying to come up with ideas of how to make this work. And by having you guys here, it really showed me that the college has grown and that it's come a long ways. And just to have you guys talking in here and coming through here and stuff is just a blessing. And I really hope it inspires other people to create their own maps and to do the artwork that they love. And also, I hope it also inspires all of you to keep in touch with your community and don't get too far out of touch with the people that support you. And I also would hope that you guys would keep in touch with each other, because that's really my personal goal with this, is that you guys get to talk to each other and keep in touch and see each other's work and maybe even come up with projects or at least share advice, things like that. So, any other questions or comments for I end the stream? Okay, going once, going
Chris,
twice.
thank you for bringing us here. It was awesome.
No problem.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys, a lot. Really.
It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll hopefully hear from you guys in the lounge. We'll talk to you in a little bit.
Bye bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.